Recording in progress.
So good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, sir.
Okay. Okay. So good morning and welcome to the second week of this module. So the first thing is I need to kind of inform you that the last week I said I can start the other two, like the remaining ruminant and non-ruminant. But the thing is, when I talked to my coordinator, the course coordinator, she told me that there are two separate modules for those sections. Initially, I thought this is kind of a 2 weeks. I need to complete all the ruminant, non-ruminant, and all the other things. So she told me that no, this is just to cover up all the poultry and those related aspects. So anyway, fortunately or unfortunately, I covered most of the part last week, kind of thinking that I need to finish non-ruminant management and the ruminant management this week. But considering the given instruction by the course coordinator, I will further kind of discuss about the housing and diseases of poultry today. So today, I think you will not have kind of a long kind of a lecture. Maybe I can finish a little bit earlier today, as I am kind of already completed most of the required sections last week. So the other thing is I am not staying at home at university premises today. So I am staying at my home. So you might hear some sounds. My son is playing around and I apologize for that. පොඩක් ඒකත් එක්කත් මාත් එක්ක බයා කරන්න මොකද මම ඉන්නේ ගෙදර අද පොඩක් සද්ද පද්ද එහෙම ඇහිද්දන්නේ ඒක ගැන එච්චර හිතන්න එපා මේ අතරින් පතර පොඩි පොඩි ඉන්ටරප්ෂන්ස් වුණොත් එහෙම මං ගිය සතියේ මං කිව්වනේ මේ රුමිනන්ට් එකයි ටික කරගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා නමුත් දැන් බැලුවාම ඒක මට දීලා තියෙන කෝස් මොඩියුල් එකත් එක්ක බැලුවාම මේ ඔක්කොම එකට දාලා තිබ්බේ. නමුත් දැන් පස්සේ මං කෝස් කෝඩිනේටර් එක වෙනම කතා කරා ගියේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කතා කරාට පස්සේ. ඒතර මට කිව්ව විදිහට ඒක ඔයාලට වෙනම මොඩියුල්ස් තියෙනවා ඔයගොල්ලන්ට මේ රුමිනන්ට් වලට වෙනම වීක්ස් දෙකක් තියෙනවා non ruminant වෙනම වීක්ස් දෙකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඇත්තටම මම ගොඩාක් sections මං ගිය සතියේ cover කරලා තිබ්බා. නමුත් අර මං එච්චර deeply touch කරපු නැති areas තමයි ඒක diseases side එක. අනික මේ housing ඒ කොහොමද ඒ පැත්ත කතා කරන්න කියලා. ඒක නිසා මම අද ඒ areas ටික cover කරන්න. නමුත් අර ගිය සතියේ වගේ පැය 6ක් විතර 5ක් 6ක් විතර ලොකුවට ඇදෙන එකක් නෑ. මොකද මේ ගොඩාක් දේවල් මම ගිය සතියේ කතා කරලා තියෙන නිසා. But before starting this lecture, if you have any concerns about last week, any kind of unclear areas, you can ask me now. So then we can discuss that now. මොනවාරි ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා නම් ගිය සතියේ වැන් අරවම පොඩ්ඩක් කියන්න. එතකොට මට ඒව ගැන කතා කරලා ඒක මේක පටන් ගන්න පුළුවන්. මොනවාරි ගැටලු තියෙනවද ඒ වැන්? නැත්නම් තව further explain කරන්න ඕන මොනවාරි තියෙනවා නම් කියන්න. මොකද එතන ගොඩාක් කව වෙලා තියෙනවා ඇත්තටම එකයි ඊට පස්සේ පෝල්ට්‍රි ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රි එකයි සම්බන්ධ දේවල් ටික ඊට පස්සේ මොනවා නමුත් ඩීප්ලි කතා කරේ නැහැ ඇත්තටම අපි මේ housing structures මොනවද what are the diseases of poultry. So those are the main two sections available for today. So I will be discuss those two sections. It may be kind of boring because lots of theories and lot of theories you need to kind of remember most of the things. So, but anyway, for the lectures, I already uploaded last week's lectures to the LMS. I think you might have accessed that one. So I kind of shortened the form, like whatever the most important things you need to know for the examination. So you can just go through that. But if you have any questions regarding those things, or if you still want me to kind of upload the full lecture series, so I can do that as well. But for the examination, just study whatever the things I have already uploaded.
Excuse me, sir. I kindly request you upload the full lecture series better.
Okay. Okay. So I can do that as well. So I will do that.
Thank you.
But don't worry about those kind of additional information given in those the long series. You may not need that for the examination. But for the general knowledge and whatever the things, if you want to follow these courses for your degree level or maybe postgraduate level, those things may be important. But for the examination and under your kind of level, those whatever the given in the lectures or already uploaded in the LMS, would be sufficient for you guys. I already have the recordings for the last week, but the thing is, I think the capacity is too high. I am not sure whether I can upload this to this LMS. I will check with the administrator, and then if it allows, I will upload that one as well. Even I am recording this lecture too. But the thing is, the capacity, whatever the megabytes is too high. I don't know why. Maybe the quality is too high for the Zoom, because it's 5 hours, so maybe 5.5 hours long lecture. So that's the case. But I will try. I will ask the administrator, and then I'll ask him to upload that.
Excuse me, sir, if it is possible, you can divide it to number of recordings and send it to. I don't know whether it is possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I am not kind of well about this Zoom using, because initially I was using other software like Microsoft Teams, and we have WebEx when I was doing my PhD. So I am not kind of very familiar with Zoom and Zoom meeting. So that's why I have some issues. But I will talk to administrator, and then whoever I think Damit is kind of controlling these the Zoom meetings and the LMS ICT center. So I will ask him to kind of upload, whether it is possible in one document or maybe separate into several series and then just upload it. I will ask him.
If we have the recording, it is very good, sir, because you are telling additional things, no, in addition to the
presentations. That's the thing I don't like for these kind of online kind of lecture series, because we don't see you and you don't see me, and then I am just talking. Maybe you guys are just listening sometimes, or maybe because in the classroom we can just talk and we can just interact and just kind of write down whatever the important things. Let's see how it goes. So this is the course kind of the schedules and how they have arranged this diploma level. And even it is easy for you guys, because you can just stay at home, and otherwise you have to spend lots of money to come to the university and then find a place to stay, and it's kind of traveling and everything. So this is kind of convenient for you guys, but in terms of learning objectives and all the other kind of stuff, yeah, it's kind of strange, but still we have to kind of follow the things given by the course coordinator and the course management. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I hope you can see the screen now. I shared it. So last time we were talking about all the whatever the management aspects the poultry or the animals, the layers and the broilers are need, and whatever the nutritional requirement, how we are going to kind of help them improve their quality of life. So one of the aspects that we can kind of generally use to improve their quality or the quality of their products and whatever the end products, we can improve their environment. Improve. So we can do several things. First is nutritional, otherwise genetic, or the environment means whatever the housing systems. So in terms of housing, so you know the poultry physiology, if you want to kind of remind, so we have kind of different breeds, they have different comfort zones. They are very high yielding. They produce more compared to the whoever we had like that jungle type. So what happens is, if we have this kind of tropical environment, like in Sri Lanka, maybe India, or maybe Pakistan, or maybe South Asian regions, or the African regions, or maybe Southern American region, what happens is the environmental factors will adversely affect those animals, their production, because our temperature or the climate kind of zone is outside their comfort zone. That's the case. So again, දැන්ට ඉන්න poultry breeds ලා ගොඩක් ඒවා හොඳ high producing කට්ටිය. For an example, high producing layers or maybe the broilers, their comfort zone. They are again hondama egolange ජීවත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් හොඳම zone එක highly productive efficient zone එක ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට අපේ temperature නැත්නම් RH combination එකට වඩා එළියෙන් තියෙනවා. So therefore we have to manage that environmental conditions if we want to kind of improve or just to maintain their quality of life, right? So that's why whatever the housing systems are really important. So what we kind of usually do, why we are kind of giving them a very good housing system is basically for the comfort as well as for the protection. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා අපි සාමාන්‍ය housing එකක් දෙන්නේ එකක් අපි උනත් දෙයක් හදාගන්න අපිට comfort zone එකේ ඕන ඉන්න අපිට ඒ වගේම ආරක්ෂාවක් ඕන නිසා, right? So we can, the other thing is we can control everything scientifically. So we can manage whatever the environmental conditions they need. We can feed them the way we want. We can provide some water the way we want, and we can provide the medicine the way we want. So we can control everything. The other one is very easy, or it is very convenient for the management. And even the economic operations, we can manage everything very conveniently without any hassle. Hassle කියලා කියන්නේ කාර්යයක් නැතුව අපිට හැමදේම නැත්නම් අපි දන්න සත්තු ටික බෑක්යාඩ් එකේ දාලා තිබ්බොත් ඔක්කොම එකපාර අපිට එක හොයාගෙන විතර එකතු කරන්න හැමදේම කිසිම කියන්නේ අනවශ්‍ය විදිහට අපිට ටයිම් එක වේස්ට් කරන්න වෙනවා, right? The next one is we can reduce the total cost of production. So we can manage, we can kind of bring them to one place and we can provide all the things. So we need less labor, we need less space. So we can reduce the total COP values for those products, right? So we can increase their performances. Yeah, whatever the intention is to produce eggs, so we can increase the egg production, or we want to increase the broiler or the meat production, okay, we can enhance that productions as well. In addition, if you provide a very good housing, a very good environment for those animals, we can ensure better health and welfare of those animals. Because they have the protection, they have the comfort, they have the better temperature, they have the better RH, and they have the better health conditions, they have the better feeds, and they are not kind of get mixed with water or any other things which will enhance the overall health and the welfare of those animals. In addition, the environmental conditions surrounding the birds, because even the macro, and I will be talking about later, the macro environment, it means the outside environment we cannot control because it depends on the overall weather conditions, but we can control the microclimatic condition which is surrounding the birds, so which is surrounding the house. So we can provide the ventilation better, we can provide the light, we can provide the RH, we can control the temperature. So we can maintain a better or proper microclimatic conditions for those animals. So in addition, so if we have a sufficient space, a house, we can increase the stocking density. We can provide the optimum area or kind of per bird space without any issues. We can, for an example, if we are going to build a house that the capacity is 1,000 birds. So we know the number of birds that we can store, we know the amount of space they need, so we can control everything, right? The next thing is we can kind of assure the optimum and uniform growth of those animals, right? Somebody messaged me saying that she cannot see anything. Can you see my...
No, sir. It is clear.
Okay. Maybe
a signal problem.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe some issue with I think her number is DAPM 03077. Or maybe something wrong with your signal or the internet connection. Please check that one because I cannot control that one, right? So yeah, so finally what we want is to optimize and enhance and uniformly obtaining a very good growth or the performances of those animals, right? So please remember these kind of things because I know you have MCQ type examination, but I can ask any question regarding kind of changing the answers of these things. So just try to kind of memorize why we are kind of giving a better environment or housing condition for those animals. Okay, so if you can remember, last time I was talking about there are different kind of housing system or the management system for these animals, right? Maybe free range, or maybe we call them backyard, or the extensive system, or the semi-intensive system. This is kind of management system in between free range or the backyard or the extensive to intensive system. Okay, so the other thing is the last one is the intensive system. So we, if you can remember, there were different cage system, there were different things that I was talking last time. So you have three basic system: the extensive, semi-intensive system, right? So I will be talking about three systems separately, so you can understand what are the main differences and what are the basic advantages as well as disadvantages in terms of these housing or management systems. Okay. So when it's come to the backyard or the free range or the extensive system, this is one of the oldest system that we added when we had a lots of space or the land available. But still there are some countries, still they have, specifically European countries, because they are better concerned about the animal health and the welfare. So they are having these kind of systems in their backyard or maybe even in large farms. සාමාන්‍ය ලංකාව වගේ රටවලට වඩා යුරෝපියන් එහෙම නැත්නම් අර animal welfare කියන ඒවට concern, highly concerned රටවල් තියෙනවා. Specifically Europeans. So they have these kind of systems in their backyard. You can house වල backyard system එක. එහෙම නැත්නම් even in they have large farms with this kind of free range system. So this is the oldest or the one of the oldest system that they have adopted. So what happens is all the birds have kind of given an opportunity for the foraging purpose. So they can just wandering around, they can just walk around and they can find whatever they want and they can just eat. But the thing is, in kind of providing some additional support, they have given some shade or the shelters for those animals and some feed, waters in some kind of a corner of those land. But overall, they are free to walk around. They have better kind of freedom compared to the other two systems. So when you consider about the density or the stocking density, even it is lesser birds per kind of hectare base or maybe per acre. So it's kind of a better system for in terms of animals, not like the kind of economical way. සාමාන්‍ය අපි ලංකාව වගේ රටවල් නම් කොහොමද ප්‍රැක්ටිස් කරනවා අඩුයි. නමුත් යුරෝපියන්ස් ලවුනත් ප්‍රැක්ටිස් කරනවා. මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ දැන් ගොඩාක් කන්සර්න් කරන්නේ animal health and welfare. Even though we kind of finally eat their meat or whatever the eggs they produce. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කොච්චර අපි කිව්වත් මේගොල්ලෝ ultimately අපි සතු slaughter කරනවා කනවා ඒක වෙනම කතාවක්. නමුත් එතකන් ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕන කරන නිදහස හැමදේම දෙනවා කියන method එකේ ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉන්නවා. But in other countries, maybe in USA or maybe in other countries, they don't kind of consider a better animal welfare. They usually target in the production or maybe eventually the economic gain of animal production. So then they have very minimum animal welfare systems, but still there are some concerns about the people and they are willing to pay higher price for these kind of products. We can have free range system, එහෙම නැත්නම් extensive system. ඒගොල්ලෝ උදාහරණයක් විදිහට එකම සුපර් මාකට් එකකට ගියාම ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ තියෙන products ඔබ සමහර රට ගිය අය දන්නවා ඇති, උන්තරන් ගිය අයත් ඇති. ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා වෙන වෙනම products තියෙනවා. මේ සත්තුන්ගේ මේ meat එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ eggs ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ free range එහෙම නැත්නම් extensive system එකේ. එහෙම වුණාම අර සාමාන්‍ය price එකට වඩා යම් ප්‍රමාණයක් වැඩි. නමුත් there are some people, many people, they are still willing to pay higher price if they have raised those animals or if they have get those products from better welfare or maybe better health animals. කියන්නේ අර animal welfare concern කරලා ඒගොල්ලෝ market කරන product එක. එහෙම සත්තු මිලදී අරගෙන ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ products කන ඕන තරම් මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා අනිත් රටවල් වල. නමුත් in terms of profitability or economic gain, most of the farmers are going for the semi-intensive or intensive systems. Okay, the next one is the kind of a semi-intensive system. So it is kind of a system in between the extensive or the intensive system, which I'll be talking a little bit later. So what happens is they have both things, which means they have the kind of freedom to just to kind of move around, and as well as they have the houses too. It's kind of a thing that basically practiced by the small scale level producers. We can see this kind of system even in Sri Lanka, but because of kind of lesser land availability as well as lesser labor, so they are basically going for the intensive management systems, and in order to get higher profit and economical gain. But still, these kind of systems are still available in Sri Lanka and even in other countries. So this is kind of an in-between system. So if you know better about the extensive system as well as intensive system, all the aspects, all the management systems are kind of in between in semi-intensive system. So you can see these kind of houses. This is not exactly what we have in our country, but the similar thing. So they have this kind of free access to the outside, they have feed, water, and they have some kind of covered area just to kind of stay at home while they are done with all the feeding and walking around. You don't need to remember all the things, just remember what are the different kind of systems and main characteristics. So I think we talked about this one last time as well. So they have different systems like the litter systems. You know that the birds can be kept on the floor as well as in different cages, right? So you can see, so this is kind of a deep litter system. So if you can remember the depth, so the broilers and layers have different height of the litter system. So maybe for the broilers, maybe maximum up to 5 centimeters, but for the layers, we can go maybe 10 to 15 centimeters in height of litter system, because we are keeping these animals for longer time period, right? But as we discussed last time, so one of the main disadvantage of this kind of deep litter system is we have to maintain a well or the high quality litter system. Otherwise, there are some diseases that can be kind of spreaded through this litter, as well as maybe some ammonia gas effect for those birds, right? So when it comes to the birds, I think even in our kind of backyard or maybe semi-indoor system, so you might have seen these kind of things. So they have this kind of floor system, the slatted floor, we call them slatted, or maybe the wire or the wire floor systems. So we are raising these kind of animals in this system over this kind of deep litter system, because it will kind of facilitate easy kind of removal of feces as well as uric acid. මේකේ තිබ්බාම ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේකේ යටින් ඒ ෆ්ලෝ එක හරහා යට යන නිසා කිසිම කරදරයක් නැතුව අපිට යටින් එකතු කරගන්න පුළුවන් මේ වගේ සිස්ටම් එකක උනත් මේ වගේ හවුස් එකක උනත්. You see this kind of raised flow system. So what you can see is you can collect all the feces and other litter material from bottom of these houses. So there is no much contamination from their flow. So that's the basic kind of advantage of having this kind of slatted or maybe wire flow system for these birds over this kind of deep, or the what you call the deep litter systems. So there are some farms still they have both. They have the resources, they have the spaces. So what they do is they kind of try to maintain both the system. So it's kind of depends on the requirement, whatever the resources they are available. But the thing is, it is very expensive and very complicated system, because you can see they have the litter system over here, and even they have the other cage or the slated areas over here. So they have to maintain both the kind of things in these kind of areas. So what happens is they have to kind of have additional resources, as well as kind of the economic kind of expenses for this kind of management system. So it's depends on the system, but in our countries we don't see these kind of highly combined or the slated systems for these birds. So these sometimes these people have these kind of different systems, and so they try to maintain this based on the certification system. Because සමහර ඒවා තියෙනවා certification system. ඒ රටවල් වලට අදාළ වෙනම certificates තියෙනවා. සත්තුන්ගේ වෙල්ෆෙයාර් ඒව ගැන කන්සර්න් කරන. ඒතකොට ඒ සත්ත්ව දෙපැත්තටම බගී බේර ගන්න ඕන නම් එක එක විදියට ඒගොල්ලෝ කම්බයින් කර කර හදලා බලනවා. එතකොට ඒ අදාළ තත්ත්වයන්ට අදාළව ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඒ ක්‍රමවේදයන් තියෙනවා. නමුත් ඉතින් අර ගොඩාක් eventually වෙන්නේ animal welfare එක හරි ඒව ගැන කතා කරත් කවුරුත් අන්තිමට බලන්නේ economic gain එකනේ. ඒතකොට ඉතින් ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට ඔය සිස්ටම් එක කොහොම තිබ්බට අන්තිමට ඉතින් සත්තුන්ගෙන් වෙන ලොකු වාසියක් නැති වෙන අවස්ථාල් තියෙනවා. So just to think about it, it will happen those kind of things as well. So you can see these kind of systems as well, different kind of the places where they have birds in different flow systems, so we call them aviaries. So kind of multi-tiered, multi-story areas. Okay, you can see they have given please turn off your microphones once you are logged in. So you can see these kind of systems. So they have given different tiers, up and different levels. So they can jump here and there. So they can have, they can, if they want to stay in a lower area, so they can stay over there, or maybe go to the top, or they can just walk around. So they can jump here and there. So they have given those kind of access. So this kind of different things just to know, you guys, so get an idea. So the other one is the cage systems. So we have the, as we discussed last time, so they are given a kind of a wire or a netting floor in small compartments, so small cages. So we can stock them in those cages. So it's better for the kind of, if you want to stock higher number of birds with less space. Less space means that we are trying to give in them minimum space. Again, a bird can own minimum recommended space. Space අපි maximum විදියට stock කරන්නම හදන්න. ඒතන සාමාන්‍ය when it comes to the free range system or maybe the semi intensive or those kind of systems, they have, even though we say okay per hectare we stock 1,000 birds, but they still have kind of a higher floor space per bird. But in these cage systems, what we do is we just stock them with their minimum requirement or the minimum or the recommended scientific spaces, so we can stock higher number of birds. So eventually what will happen is we can gain higher economic gain. Specifically what we do is this is for the layers. Cages net boxes system automatically collect. So those kind of system is better for the intensive poultry rearing systems. With maybe the initial cost may be very high, but eventual gain is very high because of higher number of birds that we can stock, and even we can collect eggs in automated system. Automated system automatic eggs collect කරගන්න පුළුවන් කිසිම කරදරයක් නැතුව. So that's why we are preferred, or modern poultry farming systems preferred these kind of management systems, because first they can save labors, because if you have a deep litter system, if you can remember last time we were talking about, at least we need to rake once a day, or maybe in the mornings for the broilers, or maybe for the once in 2 days or once in 3 days for the layers, so just to kind of eliminate sawdust gases and maybe keep it dry. So we need more labors. But in these kind of cage systems, what happens is, as I mentioned a little while ago, we can kind of collect all the feces and uric acid from the bottom of those cages, maybe underneath of the cages, not inside the cage, it is underneath. So you can easily remove the gases as well as other waste material without any contamination from the birds or the eggs or the final products. So this is just to kind of give you another heads up. So they are stocked in these kind of cages. So you can see, so they have wire mesh over here. So they just stay inside these cages. So they have given the feed access and water access. And we have a separate tray because this is kind of a little slanted.
Hello, good morning. Hello.
So please, yeah, I'm පොඩ්ඩක් පුළුවන් නම් ඔයගොල්ලෝ turn off කරගන්නවද mic? මොකද මම automatically turn off කරනවා, but you are given the access to kind of turn on when you need. ඔයගොල්ලෝ පුළුවන් නම් microphones පොඩ්ඩක් turn off කරගන්න once you are joined with these Zoom meetings, okay?
Hello. 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 Hello.
Okay. So you can collect eggs from here. So eggs are not kind of contaminated with soil or the litter system over here. So that we can collect very clean eggs from here. So they have access for the feed as well as the waters over here. So with their kind of, they cannot move here and there very much. They have just a minimum or the standard space for each bird, and then they just stay over there. So with minimum kind of movements, what happens is, so they spend less energy, so they can just focus on their production. Right? So in some automated systems, you can see, so eggs are automatically collected for these belt. So they are just automatically moved towards the stocking areas. So you can see different kind of cages inside the houses. So we call them based on the number of rows. Like, so if we have different rows, I think, yeah. So based on that, so we can have different number of rows, maybe single deck, double deck, triple, four. They can stocks in here. Last time, so this depends. So you can just go through these kind of things. They are pretty kind of simple and easy to understand. I don't think I need to kind of explain everything. So we can kind of divide them based on the density, based on the number of rows, based on the arrangement of the kind of cages, like as last time we were talking about battery cages. So the stepped cages like M type, L type. So we have different things. So based on the type of birds we rear, maybe the brooders like we are pretty small chicks. So then the growers, layers, or the breeders. So we can have different types of cages dedicated for different birds based on their type or the purpose. So just kind of get an idea of those kind of different cages. So we can have these kind of individual cages. So we have colony cages. This is just to give you some images, right? So we can have, so if you have maybe different, these kind of different systems. So we have different levels, like for an example, the single deck, double deck, triple deck. So you Google, or you can just find out different pictures if you want to see all the type of cages that can be available for the intensive management system. Yeah, so this, I think you have visited or if you are working in a layer farm. So in Sri Lankan condition, we have these kind of systems or the elevated cage houses. So you can collect all the kind of feces from underneath this floor. So it's very easy, and even it will provide a very good ventilation because they have the wire mesh over here, and over here all the floors kind of walls are covered with this kind of wire mesh. What happens is it is kind of raised about few feet above the ground, maybe 5, 6, or maybe in some cases 7, 8 feet. It depends on the environmental conditions. So what happens is, so it's better to kind of provide these conditions in dry areas or the dry zone, maybe not Western province areas. Most of the poultry or the layer farms like this. So you don't need to remember any kind of these numbers, what are the differences or the height of the pillars or anything, just to get an idea. These kind of systems are very good for the zone, and what happens is very easy to provide the ventilation, very easy to kind of remove the waste material, and birds are not contaminated with any soil or anything. The eggs are very clean. You can collect eggs very easily, and even the density is very high compared with the semi-intensive system or the free-range system, right? So you can, there are some images of those kind of systems. So it's kind of above the ground. So there are no any kind of, if there are even the flooding or anything, it will not be affected from those kind of environmental issues or any kind of things. And even it is kind of have wire, so it will provide a better ventilation. So the only concern is birds are not allowed to move outside the environment. They are confined into an kind of defined areas, but still they get better conditions compared to the other management systems. All of the numbers are on කිසිම දෙයක් මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. ඒවා just numbers එන්න පුළුවන්. පුෂ් එකක් වෙන්නේ. නමුත් just to find out what are the main differences and what are the main advantages and what are the main benefits that the animals as well as the producers will get by using different kind of systems. මොනවද වාසි, economically මොනවද වාසි, මොනවද අවාසි. ඒ වගේ දේවල් පොඩ්ඩක් ටිකක් මතක තියාගන්න නැතුව අර මේ දුර මෙච්චරයි අච්චර කුසයි මෙච්චර පල්ලයි ඒවා ලොකුවට වැදගත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ level එක. So as I mentioned last time, so we have to provide a better environmental in terms of temperature and RH for those buildings, right? So when we are kind of going for different modern housing systems, what we usually targeting is better heat conversion ratio, what we call is FCR, and we need to improve the overall production of those animals. We need to provide better care of health and welfare of those animals. We need to control the diseases, and what we want is ultimately obtaining better breeding or better life conditions for those animals, right? So that's why we are kind of going for better or whatever the improved housing system for these animals. මොකද අපි කොච්චර මොන දේ කරත් අපි ultimate අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වා වගේ ඒ සතුන්ගේ better FCR. FCR means feed conversion ratio, or we can say better feed conversion efficiency. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි මොකද්ද? If you provide 1 kilogram of feed, what is the gain? කොච්චර gain එකක් ඒගොල්ලන්ගෙන් එනවා. For an example, 1 kilogram එකක් කෑවොත් මොන හරි feed එකක් ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ultimately කොච්චර බර වැඩි වෙනවද? නැත්නම් කොච්චර eggs ප්‍රමාණයක් අපිට 1 kilogram එකකින් හම්බ වෙනවද? ඒ වගේ අදහසක් තමයි better or higher feed conversion ratio or efficiency means සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කිලෝ කොච්චර ප්‍රමාණයක් ඒගොල්ලෝ production එක outside එකට දෙනවා. ඒක අඩු වෙන්න අපිට profit එක ගොඩාක් අඩු වෙනවා. So that's what we want to know. So we want to increase the FCR. We want to improve their production in terms of eggs or the meat. We need to have a better care, and we need to control all the diseases. So what happens is we have different closed housing or the building systems. What we kind of prefer to kind of based on the direction with the environmental conditions. We provide better equipments, we provide ventilation systems or the drinking systems. So we will be talking about this. Okay. So I think you might have seen this kind of system even in Sri Lanka. You can see this kind of cost or the modern housing system with better environmental. කවුරු හරි එක්කෙනෙක් මම හිතන්නේ එක්ක බස් එකක යනවා නැත්නම් මොකක් හරි එකක් තියෙනවා චුට්ටක් එයා මයික් එක ඕෆ් කරගන්න පුළුවන්. Okay. So I think you might have seen these kind of housing systems. Oh, මොකක් හරි කියන්න දෙනවද? DAPM 032117 කියන කෙනා එයාගේ මයික් එක මේ ඔන් වෙලා තියෙනවා මොකක් හරි වට කියන්න තියෙනවද? නමක් පේන්නේ නැහැ ඒක වගේ. ඔය කවුද මැසේජ් එකක් දාලා තිබ්බා එයාට කතා කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා තියෙනවා මොකක්ද කියලා. Okay, so these are the different modern systems. So you can see they have all the walls are closed, so they have different fans installed outside that is to control the ventilation. So the birds are in different system, maybe the deep system or maybe the cage system or the battery system. So those are the kind of modern systems. So I think I have several kind of slides later as well. I'll be talking about how we are going to control the temperature, how we are going to control the RH and all the ventilation support for those birds in a little bit later. So I think I kind of went briefly in these kind of factors last time. So what are the basic factors that we should consider when we are kind of building or kind of constructing a house? So we are called them principles of housing. Briefly kata kara. So the first one is we need to select a site, a better site, and we have a better housing design, kind of supporting the environment or the animal health and welfare, because we cannot build a house, very closed housing system in dry zone. We can build, but the thing is we need to provide a better internal or the micro environmental control in order to provide the better conditions for those birds. So the housing environment, housing equipments, the space that we should give for each animal, the light management. I think you can remember we say for the broilers, first week we have to provide at least 16 hours of light per day, and for the layers at least up to 17 hours per day. We need to maintain or manage the light in order to enhance the feed intake and ultimately the gain and egg or the meat production. And we have to maintain very good hygiene and sanitary conditions inside the house. And even specifically for these birds, we need to maintain a better biosecurity comparatively the swine and ruminant management. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඇති ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපිට මේ වගේ farms වලට easy access දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ගොඩක් වෙලාවට දෙන්නේ a very controlled access specifically for the young birds or the poultry birds, as well as even in swine farm compared to the ruminant animals or the dairy cattle. ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මොකද මේගොල්ලෝ highly susceptible to diseases. So if one bird get any disease, so we will be talking about those diseases in the next lecture. So it's really difficult to control the spreading of disease among these birds, right? So please kind of remember about what are the basic principles of housing, or what are the basic factors we should consider when we are going to develop or construct an animal housing for poultry or the broilers or the layers. This is for both the birds, but there will be some minor differences between those two, broilers and layers, but still the main principles behind house development is very good selection of a site, housing design, the housing environment, the equipment, space, light, hygiene, sanitary, and biosecurity control of those birds. So the selection of site, so basically I kind of discussed that last time as well. So it should be located away from residential or industrial area. Again, අපි කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අර ජනගහනය අධික තැනකට මේ අපි සාමාන්‍ය මේ වගේ house එකක් construct කරන්නේ ටිකක් ඈත. නිකන් rural කියන එක නෙමෙයි මෙතන අදහස. මේ මිනිස් ජනාවාස වලින් ඈත කියන, right? So it should have a very good soil and drainage, because we are talking about kind of animal management system. We need to have a very good soil and drainage system. Because the water is stacked වෙලා තියෙන තැනක් නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් එහාට එකක් spread වෙන පුළුවන් diseases. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ සත්තුම වතුර නිසා යට වෙලා හරි මොන හරි flooding වෙන system එකක් තියෙන area එකක් නම් ඒ සත්තුව ඒ හරිය ගන්න හොඳ area එකක් නෙවෙයි. මොකද it will create a very bad condition or the environmental conditions for those birds in terms of spreading some diseases, right? So it should have very easy access to water, because we were talking about they need water access all day or throughout their life without any restriction. And we need electricity. That's for basically to provide heat, and we have to control all the other automated system if we are kind of following a modern housing system. The ventilation, RH control, temperature control. In order to control those kind of things, we need electricity. Even for selection of bed, packaging of insects, or even we have a broiler farm. What we have to do is we have to have different equipments operated by electricity. So therefore, we need to have a better or kind of uninterrupted water and electric supply in order to maintain a very good poultry production system, right? So we need to provide a better shade, better protection, and we need to kind of provide proper ventilation. Okay. So we have to have a better market, and also we should have a better road facilities or proper facilities for the accesses, right? So please remember these kind of factors that you are kind of planning to kind of start poultry farm or a broiler farm. So when you are going to select a site, you need to have these factors. හුඟක් වෙලාවට මේවා ගැන හුඟක් හොඳින් හිතලා බලන්න ඕනේ. අපි මේ වගේ poultry farm එකක් එහෙම නැත්නම් broiler farm එකක් පටන් ගන්න යනවා නම් මේ factors ටික හරියම වැදගත් වෙනවා. මොකද අපි හිතන්න වතුර එකතු වෙන තැනක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්, ඒකරන්න බොණ්ඩ වතුර හොයාගන්න නැති තැනක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Electricity now we can go for a solar energy now since we have that technology, but still we should have to have better water supply, better soil and drainage system, and even better ventilation system. හිතන්න දැන් කැලයක් මැද වගේ farm එකක් දානවා ඒක කරන්න බෑ. මොකද අපිට wind breaks වෙනවා. දැන් අපි plants ගොඩාක් තියෙනවා නම් wind එක break වෙනවා. එතනින් එහාට wind flow එකක් එහෙම නැත්නම් ventilation එක හරියට දී ගන්න බැරි වෙනවා. Ultimately the market. So that's also very important. You should have a better market if you are going to start a broiler farm. හිතන්න කොහේ හරි area එකක් උකුල් select කරගන්නවා. ඒ පැත්තේ ඉන්න මිනිස්සු විතර කන්නේත් නැත්නම් මම කියන්නේ hypothetically විතර කන්නේ නැත්නම් මේ chicken meat කන්නේ නැත්නම් එතන ඒ වගේ තැනක farm එකක් දාලා කිසිම තේරුමක් නැහැ. මොකද product එක ඒගොල්ලන්ට sell කරගන්න බෑ. In addition, they should have a better transport facilities, basically the road conditions and the other infrastructure, right? So the housing design, the other thing is the directions, and there should be kind of minimum distance between two houses. For an example, if you are going to construct like several buildings inside that farm, you should have kind of a minimum space in order to maintain better protection for birds inside those or each pen. You can have each pen එක නැත්නම් each cage එක අපි ලොකු buildings ගත්තට පස්සේ buildings අතරත් යම්කිසි proper space එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒ මොකොත් නෙමෙයි හිතන්න එක pen එක නැත්තම් building එක මොකක් හරි disease එකක් spread වුණොත් එහෙම ඒකෙන් අනිත් එකට ඒක spread වෙන්න තියෙන සම්භාවිතාව වැඩි නිසා. Therefore, you should have to have minimum distance, right? So you have to remember that one. In addition, the house orientation. So you have to have a better housing orientation based on the climatic conditions in the area. Hot and cold, both තියෙනවා නම් කොහොමද අපි direction එක ගැන හිතන්නේ? එහෙම නැත්නම් cold climate, very cold climate condition එකක්ද? එහෙම නැත්නම් very hot climate conditions එකක්ද? මේ හැමදේම ගැන අපිට හිතන්න වෙනවා අපි direction එක select කරගන්න මේ house එක, right? You have to think, but there are some kind of barriers we cannot adhere to these kind of standards. For an example, example housing follow but we have to select the best option based on the availability of the resources, right? But whatever the ultimate design, the kind of planning is to provide better conditions for the birds, right? So when it comes to the kind of constructions of those kind of how you have to have a better foundation for those buildings. I think these are pretty simple to understand for you guys, and kind of the length is fine. So for an example, අපි house එකක් හදනකොට අපි length එක ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට restrict කරන්නේ නැහැ. කියන්නේ housing එකක length එක අපි දිග කියන එක. But for the width, you usually have some control. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට මේ ගොඩාක් ලොකු width එකක් ගත්තොත් එහෙම අපිට ventilation control කරන්න එහෙම පොඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් එන නිසා අපිට ඒක නිසා මේ housing design එක චුට්ටක් sophisticated විදිහට යන්න වෙනවා. නමුත් ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට අපි length එක ගැන හිතන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක නිසා මොකද length එකෙන් අපි ලොකු issue එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. නමුත් width එක ගොඩාක් වැඩි වෙන්න අපිට ventilation කරගන්න පොඩි ප්‍රශ්න ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So based on that we have to adjust the different housing systems or the roofing systems. So please consider those kind of factors when you are going to construct or build a house for poultry bird. So then the height. So height is basically depends on the cage, battery system, or depleter system, or whatever the kind of system that you are going to practice. Based on that, you can select the housing or the height of the house that you are going to construct. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් අපි height එක අපි තීරණය කරන්නේ කොහොමද සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඇතුලේ මේ සත්තු ඇති කරන්න යන්නේ කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ මොන level එකකට හිතන්න එක TA එකකට යනවා. නැත්නම් ඒක අර අපි කිව්ව ඉස්සෙල්ලා පෙන්නනවා කියන්නේ තනිකරම මේ battery cages විදියට යනවාද? ඒ battery cages වල කිසිම different levels නැද්ද? levels වැඩිපුර තියෙනවා නම් ඔයගොල්ලන් height එක වැඩි කරන්න වෙනවා. අන්න ඒ වගේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් depleter system එකක්. If it is a depleter system, you don't need to have a very kind of higher walls එක ගොඩාක් උසට හදන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. මොකද ඒකෝ සානිකර they are basically reared on the floor, so then you don't need very high walls for those buildings, right? So it depends on your kind of rearing system, you can adjust the height of those buildings, right? So the next one is the side walls. Side walls ගැන කතා කරනකොට, so they are very important. The first one is kind of we need to protect the animals from the adverse environment as well as the predators in the pulva. Therefore, we have to kind of have a very closed walls. Closed කියලා කියන්නේ මම කියන්නේ බිත්ති බදිනවා කියන එක නෙමෙයි. But still we have to cover those walls with some materials in order to avoid any entering of predators. That is one of the requirements. In addition, in order to provide a better ventilation as well as better micro or the environmental conditions inside the houses. House වල මේ side walls එහෙම හදනකොට හරියට පරිස්සමෙන් හදන්න වෙනවා. එකක් මේ closed අර මම කිව්වා වගේ මෙන්න මේ වගේ සම්පූර්ණ closed කරපු walls වලින් හදන්න බෑ. සමහර side walls ඒ environment එකේ condition එක ගන්න. හිතන්න very dry zone එකක් න අපි මේ වගේ sealed අර ඉස්සෙල්ලා පෙන්නන වගේ මේවත් ඒ වගේ seal level එකකට ගියොත් එහෙම මේ birds ලට ජීවත් වෙන්න ගොඩාක් අමාරු වෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපිට යන option එක තමයි තුල ගොඩාක් sophisticated instrument ventilation එක වැඩි කරන්න, RH එක control කරගන්න, cooling system එක අපි අනවශ්‍ය විදියට spend කරන්න කිසිම තේරුමක් නැතුව, right? So ඒවා ගැන චුට්ටක් හිතන්න වෙනවා, ඒ වගේව plan කරන්න. So the next one is the type of roofs. So it also depends on the condition or the environmental condition, which means the outside environmental conditions that we are going to build that house, right? අපි house එකේ මේ roofing system එකත් අපි ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා සමහර ඒවා එක වර්ග තියෙනවා සමහර මම හිතන්නේ materials ගැන කතා කරනවා ඉස්සරහට. So however you have to select based on the conditions that you are going to rear those animals, right? So you can use different paints just to reflect. You are going to use metal sheets, so you can kind of apply some paints just to reflect whatever the sunlight that is kind of directly coming to the walls. Okay, so I showed you different types of houses last time, the roofing type. So these are the same kind of similar type of images or the cartoons of those houses. So you can see you can have different shape types, or maybe you can have different shapes. That's all depends on the requirement going to build that house. ගොඩාක් හිතන්න මේ ඉන්නේ host housing system එක දිහා, if you are going to build a house for poultry, maybe in up country or maybe hill country areas, because they are the environmentally is pretty cooler compared to the dry zone of Sri Lanka. So we can dry zone එක මේ වගේ එකක් ගහනවා නම් අපි ගහන්නේ නැහැ සාමාන්‍ය. කාට හරි මා අත්‍යවශ්‍යතාවයක් තියෙනවා නම් හදන්න. එහෙනම් අපි කොහොමද මේක ඇතුලේ environmental condition එක control කරන්නේ කියන අපිට ඒතොරෙන් මේ වගේ cross system එකකට අපි dry zone එකේ ගියොත් එහෙනම් මොකද වෙන්නේ? සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම environment temperature එක වැඩි වෙනවා. RH එකේ ප්‍රශ්නෙත් එක්ක යා circulation එක අඩු වුණාම සත්තු අනිවාර්යෙන් වැඩි වෙලා යන නිසා මැරලා වැටෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක නිසා කොහොමද අපි ඒක control කරන්නේ? ඒක නිසා මේ වගේ house system එකකට යනකොට මේ වගේ එකට යනවාද කියලා depends කරන්නේ. ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඒ තියෙන environment condition එක සාය අවුරුද්ද පුරාම අපි බලනවා කොහොමද මේ normal temperatures RH වෙනස් වෙන්නේ. ඒ වගේම weather එක කොහොමද වෙනස් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ හැමදේම බලලා තමයි මේ වගේ system එකකට අපි යන්නේ. You might have seen these kind of structures in Sri Lanka as well. This is called monitor type of housing systems, right? Or even this kind of half monitor type. So that is basically just to kind of get the better ventilation, better environmental condition, kind of controlling inside those houses, right? So these type of houses are from like countries they can expect lots of snow or maybe different seasons. The seasonal variations in the countries වල තමයි සමහරවල් මේ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම closed house system වලට යනවා. මොකද මේවා වගේ condition එකකින් හිම වැටලා එහෙම නැත්නම් temperature එක drop වෙනවා නම් Celsius or minus Celsius, maybe 10 to 20 15 sometimes. So you have to control all the temperature RH inside those houses. Maybe you have to have some heaters in order to heat the house throughout the winter season, so then to provide the optimum conditions for those birds, right? So before starting for the types of protein materials, maybe I will give you a 15 minutes break, and then we can start and finish this section and the remaining section under the rest of the lecture materials. මේකේ තියෙන ප්‍රමාණයයි ඊට පස්සේ අපිට ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙන ටික අපි ළඟට කතා කරමු. Okay? මොනවාරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් එකක් අහන්න. මම ගැටලුවක්. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Or you can have the break and you can join maybe around 9, in between 9:40 to 45.
Excuse me, sir.
How?
What is the meaning of easy houses?
Those are called environmental controlled houses. Easy. That's why I just put it. අපි කියන්නේ environmentally control කරපු එහෙම තමයි modern housing system කියන්නේ. ඒක ඒ වගේ නමකින් තමයි එතන කියන්නේ. easy කියලා කියන්නේ standard term එකක් නෙමෙයි. Okay. Just to kind
Okay,
of
thank you, sir.
Recording stopped.
ඔක්කොම
නේ පොඩ්ඩක් කියන්න. මේක ඔයගලන්ට හම්බුණාද මේ කරිකියුලම් එක? ෂෙයා කරලා තිබ්බේ නැද්ද? කවුද? ශශිනිස්. මේක තමයි ඔයගලන් කරිකියුලම් එක දැන් තියෙන්නේ. දැන් ප්‍රොපෙර් කරලා ෆලෝ කරගෙන මෙතන මේ කරිකියුලම් එක. පේනව නේද මම දාලා තියෙන එක?
Yes, sir.
We can see, sir. Yes.
Okay. So මේකේ දැන් ඔය මෙන්න මේකයි තියෙනවා. ඔය විදිහට එක එක sectors sections තියෙනවා. දැන් first එකක් විදිහට ඒගොල්ලෝ animal production side එකේ areas තුනක් ඒගොල්ලෝ target කරනවා. එකක් තමයි ඔය role of livestock and poultry. මේක තමයි දැන් අපි මේ cover කරන්නේ. මම මේක තමයි අර misunderstanding කරගෙන තිබ්බේ. ඊට පස්සේ මම අර ආයි confirm කරගත්තා ශශිට කතා කරලා. මේ එතකොට ඒ වගේ මේක models modules තුනක් යනවා. එතකොට මේ කොටස එකක් cover කරනවා මේ සතියේ මේ වෙනකොට ඊට පස්සේ තව දවසක මම හිතන්නේ මේ සෙමිස්ටර් එකේදී ඊළඟ සෙමිස්ටර් එකේදී කියලා මම දන්නේ හරියටම. මම ඩිප්ලෝමා එක මම හිතන්නේ අවුරුද්දයි නේද ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කියලා ඇත්තේ. මම සෙමිස්ටර්ස් දෙකයි ඇත්තේ මම හිතන්නේ ඩිප්ලෝමා එක ලෙවල් එකේදී. මතක හිටියේ.
1 year, sir. 1 year.
ඒක තමයි. ඒක semesters
1 year.
1 year, right? So which means 2 semesters, like 6 months to 6 months. 6 months මේ යන්නේ නමුත් සාමාන්‍ය අපි කියන්නේ එහෙමයි. So non dominant management dominant එහෙම එකක් යනවා එක section එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ එක cluster එකක් විදිහට යනවා. ඊළඟට තියෙනවා ඔයගොල්ලන්ට මම හිතන්නේ business environment. So I think maybe Shashi might have completed these ones first 2 weeks වල මේක නේද කරන්න ඇත්තේ. මම හිතන්නේ fundamentals of management අර principles මම හිතන්නේ ඒ side එකේ business environment side එක. ඊළඟට crop science එකේ crop side එකේ වෙනම ටිකක් තියෙනවා. agronomic practices so මේ වගේ modules 4යි. ඒතර මේ වගේ එක සතියක ඕගොල්ලෝ සති දෙකක් ඇත්තටම. කියන්නේ මේ සතියේ ලබන සතියේ ගිය සතියේ කොටසක් කර ඒ වගේ මේක කොටස් දෙකක්ම අතර සති දෙකක් යනවා මේ එකම එක sections දෙකකට කඩලා. ඒ වගේ production area එක තියෙනවා. Design and technology, which is basically engineering side, the environmental management, that's for the semester 1. Semester 2 is food manufacturing, general competency, skill development. So anyway, you have to complete maybe overall 30 credits, I think. Yeah, 30 credits. So මේවා තමයි මම හිතන්නේ මේක ඔයගොල්ලන්ට share කරන්න ඇති ශශි දෙයි. ඔය ටික cover වෙන්න ඕනේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ සම්පූර්ණ ඩිප්ලෝමා එක අවුරුද්ද ඉවර වෙනකොට. ගිය සතියේ මම හිතන්නේ ශශි කරලා ඉවර ගිය සතියේ ඉස්සෙල් සතියේ ශශි කරලා ඉවර කරන්න නැති ඔය එයාට තියෙන එක කොටසක්. ඒකට ඒ වගේ දැන් මම මේ සතියේ ඇනිමල් එකේ පළවෙනි කොටස ඉවර වෙනවා. එතකොට ඊට වෙනකොට ඔයගොල්ලන් ගෲප්ස් දෙකටම සන්ඩේ and සැටර්ඩේ දෙකටම මේ කොටස ඉවර වෙනවා. ඒකට ඒ වගේ මේ ඊට පස්සේ මම දැන් නොමිනල් මැනේජ්මන්ට් එක තියෙනවා නොමිනල්. ඒ වගේ එතකොට sessions එනවා මේ exam එක ඊළඟට තියෙයි. මේ ඔක්කොම cover වෙන්න ඕනේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ diploma එක complete කියලා කියන්නේ. එතන තේරෙන හැටියට මට කිව්වද. ඊට පස්සේ මේ course individually මොන ඒවල් ඉගෙන ගන්න තියෙන්නේ. මේක දීලා නැත්නම් ඉල්ල ගන්න ශශිට message එකක් දාලා ශශි share කරයි මම. ශශිගේ ડોක්ටර් අපි ශශි කියලා කියන ડોක්ටර් ශශිකට මේ message එකක් දැම්මොත් එයා share කරයි ඔයගොල්ලන් හම්බෙලා නැත්නම්. දැන් මේක යූස් කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඩිග්‍රී එකෙන් පස්සේ ඔයගලන්ට එන්ටර් වෙන්න ඒ කියන්නේ මේකට පස්සේ ඕන එන්ටර් වෙන්න පුළුවන් ඩිග්‍රී ලෙවල් එකට අපි හිතන්නේ. තියෙනවා එක්ස්ටර්නල් ඩිග්‍රී එකක්. එහෙම කැමති අය ඉස්සරහට යන්න. ඒකට එන්ටර් වෙන්න පුළුවන් ඩිප්ලෝමා ලෙවල් එකකින් පස්සේ මේක අවුරුදු 3ක් ඒකම මම හිතන්නේ. ඊට පස්සේ අවශ්‍ය නම් මාස්ටර් එකක් තියෙනවා ඒක. මේකෙම ගන්න නමුත් අර එහෙමකින් අර ඒගොල්ලෝ හදලා තියෙන සර්ටිෆිකේට් ලෙවල්, ඩිප්ලෝමා ලෙවල්, ඩිග්‍රී ලෙවල් ඊට පස්සේ පෝස්ට් ග්‍රැජුවේට් ලෙවල් කියලා. සමහර ඉතින් කම්පැනි වල එහෙම නැත්නම් අදාළ ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් එකට ඕන කරන විදිහ අනුව එක එක ස්ටෙප්ස් වලට රෙජිස්ටර් වෙලා කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේක මම හිතන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලන් ඩිග්‍රී එකක් කරනවා නම් ඩිග්‍රී එකට කියන්නේ ඒ ඩිග්‍රී ලෙවල් එක එහෙම කරනවා නම් ඒකට බේසික් රික්වයර්මන්ට් එක විදිහට තමයි යූස් කරන්නේ. අවුරුවරි දාලා තියෙනවා I am not added to WhatsApp group කියලා. ඒක මට control කරන්න බෑ. I cannot control that one. You have to contact Dr. Shashi and I think she will add you to WhatsApp group if you are not included into the WhatsApp. Administrator ඉන්නේ යා. ඉතින් එයා ඒක control කරන්නේ යා. මම අර ලෙක්චර්ස් උත් ගොඩාක් මේව කරලා දුන්නේ මොකුත් නෙමෙයි. මොකද ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඩිප්ලෝමා ලෙවල් එකේදී ඔච්චර ධර්මයට මම හිතන්නේ අහන්නේ නැහැ. කිසිම ඒකේදී බේසික් ඉන්ට්‍රොඩක්ෂන්ස් තමයි දෙන්නේ. නමුත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඩිග්‍රී ලෙවල් එකට ආවහම අර එහෙම ඕකෙම ඇඩ්වාන්ස් ලෙවල් එකට යනවා. ඉතින් අර ඒකට නිකන් අර රිපීටිෂන්ස් අඩු කරගන්න ඕනේ. එහෙම ප්‍රශ්නක් තියෙනවා සමහර වෙලාවට. Okay, let's meet around 9:45. So you have any small break. පාට ඉන්න බැරි වුණා හරි මොකක් හරි කියලා. එයා මම හරියටම දන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කොහොමද දන්නේ ඒක ක්විස් එකක් මිස් වුණාම ඒක අරේන්ජ් කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා. ටුට්ටක් එයාගෙන් අහන්න ශෂි මිස්ගෙන් මේ මොකද්ද ඔයාට කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයාට හදලා වෙනම එක්සෑම් එකක් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද නැත්නම් මොකක් හරි ඒකට මම නම් හරියට දැනුවත් නැහැ මේ වගේ එක්සෑම් එකක් මිස් වුණොත් මොකද කරන්න කියලා. අපි අර අනිත් ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම්ස් වල නම් රිපීට් එක්සෑම් කියලා එකක් දෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ එහෙම නැත්නම් මේකප් එක්සෑම් කියලා. ෆේල් වුණොත් රිපීට් එකක් දෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් මිස් වුණොත් මේකප් එක්සෑම් එකක් දෙනවා. නමුත් ඔයා ඒක ප්‍රයර් ඉන්ෆෝම් කරාද යාට? ඒක තමයි ප්‍රශ්නේ. රශීට ඒක කියන්නේ කවුරුද? මගේ එකක් මිස් වුණාත් ඒක කියන්න ඕනේ. දැන් හිතන්න ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවනේ කවුද එක්සෑම් එක තියෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒතකොට එක්සෑම් එක තියෙන දවසට ඉස්සෙල්ලා පොඩ්ඩක් දැනුවත් කරන්න වෙනවා. ඒ අදාළ ලෙක්චරර්ව නැත්නම් අඩුම ගානේ ලෙක්චරර්ව බැරි වුණොත් හරි කෝඩිනේටර්ව හරි මම දන්නේ කොහොම හරි දැනුවත් කරන්න වෙනවා arrangement එකකට. නැත්නම් absent කියලානේ වැටෙන්නේ උතන. absent වුණාම මම හිතන්නේ ඊළඟට ඔයා ඒකට හේතුවක් දෙන්න ඕනේ. මම හරියටම දන්නේ නැහැ. මම කියන්නේ අපේ internal students ලාගේ වෙන දේ මම කියන්නේ සහ external degree program එකේ අයගේ ඒගොල්ලන්ට අපි ඔයාගේ හේතුව දක්වලා දෙනවා. ඇයි හේතුව ආවේ නැත්තේ? ඒකට medical reason එකක්ද නැත්නම් හිතන්න වෙන මොකක් හරි emergency දෙයක්ද? ඊට පස්සේ ඒකේ approval එක ගන්න ඕනේ board of study එකෙන්. board of study කියන්නේ වෙන group එකක් ඉන්නවා lecturers ලා professor ලා එකක්. ඒගොල්ලෝ decide කරනවා මේක valid reason එකක්ද මේ absent වෙන්න ඒක නිසාද කියලා මෙහෙම බලලා තමයි ආයි approval එක දෙන්නේ. ඒක proper එකක් විදිහට proper කියන්නේ වාට කිසිම ගැටලුවක් නැතුව ඒකට විභාගයට මුහුණ දෙන්න පුළුවන්ද නැත්නම් වා ලකුණු කීයක් ගත්තත් මෙහිමද වෙන්නේ මේ පාස් මාක් එක මේක දෙන්න. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට A B C D කියලා අපි ලකුණු දෙනවා නම් A එකක් දෙනවා ලකුණු 80ට එහා හින්නේ. මම හරියටම දන්නේ නැහැ. මම නිකන් මේ just කියන්නේ internal ළමයි. ඒක valid reason එකක් නෙමෙයි නම් අර මේ ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට ඒකට ඒගොල්ලෝ කොච්චර ලකුණු ගත්තා C පාස් එකකට තමයි යන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් මේවත් තියෙනවා. ටුට්ටක් එක ශෂින්ස්ගෙන් අහලා බලන්න. වා ඒක මොකක් හේතුව මතද කියන එක යාට කියලා. valid or reliable reason එකක් නම් යා මොකක් හරි arrangement එකක් දායි. නැත්නම් යා කියයි පොලිවමක් දෙන්න කියයි. නැත්නම් medical එකක් one way medical reason එකක් නම් එහෙම තමයි exam එකක් දෙන්නේ. ගන්න තරමට.
ඒක මට උනේ අර memo 3 attempts කියලා වැටිලා attempts 3ට වඩා වැඩි වුණ හින්දා මේ head වෙන්න බැරි වුණා.
3ට වඩා වැඩි උනේ කොහොමද? ඒ කියන්නේ වාගේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නිසා දන්නේ.
මම try කරා මේ කොච්චරවත් කරගන්න මට question quiz එක ලැබුණ නැති හින්දා.
ඒක වා ඒ වෙලේ ශෂීට කිව්වේ නැද්ද? මේ මොකක් හරි වා ඒ ගාම ඉමීඩියට්ලි ආව දැනුවත් කරේ නැද්ද? ශෂී. ඒක තමයි. ඒ වගේ issues ආවොත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ කියන්න. හොඳේ නැත්තම් වෙන්නේ දැන් ඔය technical issues එන්නත් පුළුවන් නේ. technical fault එනකොට ඒගොල්ලෝ හිතන නැති ඔක්කොම හරියට නමුත් වාගේ අතන වැල්ලා තියෙන්නේ කොහොමද දන්නේ නැද? ඒක යාගෙම තමයි අහන්න වෙන්නේ. කියන්නේ වාගේ දැන් attempt එක වාගේ 3යි කියලා ආවට එයාගේ කොහොම පෙන්නනවද දන්නේ නැහැ. ඒවා attempt කරලා submit උන්නේ නැද්ද? මොකක් වුණාද? ඒ කියන්නේ එක quiz එක එක question එකක්වත් access උන්නේ නැද්ද? එහෙම දුන්නේ. මොකක්ද උනේද?
නැහැ.
අනිත් පැත්තට එහෙම ප්‍රශ්න ආවද? ඒ කියන්නේ කරන්නේ නැතිනේ ඔක්කොම වගේ නේද? So if you have any questions regarding the logging into the system, accessing the exams or quizzes or whatever the things, you just inform the instructor or the coordinator as soon as you face those kind of issues. Otherwise, what happens is they might think, okay, they are done, or maybe you are kind of that's your knowledge, or maybe because automatic system එකක් මම හිතන්නේ ඒතකොට ඔගේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ප්‍රශ්න ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අනිවාර්යෙන් ශශීට කියන්න. නැත්නම් ශශී හිතන් ඉන්න නැති මෙහෙමයි කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ රිසල්ට් ෂීට් එකේ 0 හරි ෆේල් කියලා හරි එන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක මොකක් හරි ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැනුවත් කරලා අඩු ගන්න ඔයගොල්ලෝ වාගාව ස්ක්‍රීන්ෂොට් එකක්වත් තියෙනවා මොකක්ද උනේ කියලාවත් අඩු ගන්න. මොකක්වත් ගත්තේ නැහැ. ඒ වගේ එහෙම තියෙනවා. එහෙනම් ශශීට ඊමේල් එකක් හරි මේ ඔයාලා මම හිතන්නේ WhatsApp එකේ ශශීගේ නම්බර් එක ඇතිනේ. ශශීට ඊමේල් එකක් කරන්න නැත්නම් කෝල් එකක් හරි දීලා ශශීත් එක්ක කතා කරන්න. මගේ එකෙත් එහෙම තමයි මොකක් හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් වුණොත් එක්ක මාව දැනුවත් කරලා තියන්නේ නැත්නම් මේ දවසේ ඇතුළත නැත්නම් ඒ කියන්න මේ ශශීට දැනුවත් කරන්න. එයා කෝඩිනේටර් නිසා මෙහෙම ප්‍රශ්නයක් වුණා මගේ එක්සෑම් එක කරද්දී කියලා. නැත්නම් දැන් අන්තිමට ඔයා ලකුණු බලලා එහෙම කරලා රිසල්ට්ස් ඉෂුව කරන්න එනකොට තමයි ඔය ප්‍රශ්නේ ඇති වෙන්නේ ෆේල් කියලා වගේ ආවොත් එහෙම ඊට පස්සේ ආයෙක ඇදලා ගන්න බෑනේ අනිත් පැත්තට රිසල්ට් එක අවුට් වුණාට පස්සේ නේ.
හරි thank you sir.
ඔව් චුට්ටක් යාර කියන්න. Okay, so I think this is very kind of a common knowledge for you guys. So we have different roofing materials. We can use aluminum sheets, asbestos, or maybe the tiles, or the coconut leaves or the thatched roofs. So we can have different roofing materials when we are constructing our houses for poultry animals, right? This depends, even sometimes it depends on the accessibility for these materials. Sometimes depends on the price or the market price, or maybe the easiness, or maybe if you are going for a more kind of profit-based kind of management system. So you can even go for the natural roofing materials, but you have to kind of repair those kind of things time to time. But initial capital may be high for the aluminum sheets, or maybe even asbestos, or even for the tiles. But in terms of shelf life or the long-term usage of those materials, maybe those are profitable. Capital cost එක වැඩි වෙන්න පුළුවන් අපි aluminum sheets, asbestos එහෙම නැත්නම් අනිත් ඒවාට ගියොත්. නමුත් අර natural එහෙම පොල් අතු වගේ දානවා නම් ඒ වගේ දේවල් වලට සාපේක්ෂව initial capital එක වැඩි වුණත් ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ long term durable roofing materials use comes. But it depends on the management, the requirement, the availability of those materials. So you can select whatever the most suitable materials for the farm. The type of floors. So it can also depends on the requirements or availability of the resources. So basically most of the areas or most of the farms, they use concrete floors basically to kind of proofing or proof for the predators, specifically rat attacks and the other animals attacks. We have to have kind of completely kind of the concrete structures in order to avoid those kind of attacks. In addition, we can kind of avoid any dampness. Materials, if you use soil, so what happens is when it mixes with water, and or maybe other materials is get dirty. So in order to avoid, we have to have a very good floor systems. An example, concrete floors, specifically for deep litter kind of systems, right? So you can have doors. So the doors, whatever the doors that you are kind of designing, you can have with the access or open access from the outside of those farms. Open කරන්නේ ඔයගේ farms වල දොරවල් එළියට. ඒ වගේ අපි හදනවා. In addition, we have to have a food bag like this. This is to kind of provide better biosecurity environment for those animals. As we go in, what we usually do is we clean our shoes here, and we usually put a disinfection here. So just to kind of disinfect whatever the materials in our shoes that we are usually wearing, or boots. We usually use boots when we entering into these premises. You can go back to the farm here, food bath. Food bath disinfect අපි දාගෙන බූට්ස් වල තියෙන soil material අරගෙන ඔක්කොම wash කරලා මේක dip කරලා තමයි අපි ඇතුළට enter වෙන්නේ. ඒක ගොඩක් වෙලාට ඒක biosecurity එක මේ protect කරන්න ගොඩක් වෙනවා. Because we are wearing the same boots all the time, so we are moving from one pen to another pen, or maybe one type to another type. So what we have to do is, before we entering into these kind of premises, we have to wash and disinfect our shoes. So for those kind of purposes, we have to have these kind of structures or maybe designs, right?
Recording in progress.
So I think you might have seen this kind of floors even before. This is an Indian word called kacha word, kacha floor. This is basically the mud. Structure. So you can go, this is kind of very primitive method, so very kind of backyard system. Backyard means like not a very extensive system, but whatever the kind of the system, very primary or structures. But we can, the modern system, usually go with the concrete floors or maybe the wire mesh or the plastic slatted floors to rear those birds. සාමාන්‍ය ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට දැන් පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ මෙන්න මේක concrete floor එකක් වෙනවා deep heater system එකකට යනවා නම් නැත්නම් plastic slatted floor අර පොඩි සිදුරු එහෙම නැත්නම් spaces තියෙන slatted floor එකකට යනවා මේ modern housing system නැත්නම් මේ අලුත් තත්ත්වයෙන් දැන් හදන housing systems වලට මේ birds ලා. So when it comes to the housing environment, so we have two environmental kind of conditions. The first one is the macro environment. The other one is the micro environment. Macro means the largest environment, which means the outside, the ambient environment. So we cannot kind of manipulate that, right? So we cannot control the sun, or maybe we cannot control the ventilation. We cannot control the RH. We cannot control the temperature or the amount of radiation that we get. We cannot control those kind of things like a manual control. So what we have to do is we can control the micro environment, which is kind of surrounding the animal or the normal, the local environment inside the house. Again, අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි මේ කියන environment එක කියන අපේ එළිය ගත්තොත් ඒ තියෙන environment අපිට light එක control කරන්න බෑ. sun control කරන්න බෑ. යා flow එක හැමදේම අපිට එළිය උකුත් කරන්න අමාරුයි. But inside the house, inside the cage, so we can control those kind of conditions. We can control the temperature, we can control the gases, we can control the RH, we can control whatever the dust, the microorganisms available surrounding those animals. We can control whatever the particular matter. You can bedding material choose control. So those factors are called micro environmental factors. So what we can do is, by controlling those factors, we can improve the air quality, relative humidity, the temperature surrounding those animals, or just close to those animals, but not the outside or the macro environmental condition, right? Control mainly control micro environmental condition. Environment, right? Not the macro environmental condition, right? So what we can do is the same thing. So we usually eliminate whatever the macro environmental conditions kind of contacting with house. How we are kind of control those things. We try to control the macro environmental conditions. So we can have a micro environment in an adverse effect. Basically, we control micro environmental condition manipulate control, right? So that's yes.
EC sir.
It's called environmental controlled. Environmental short form environmental controlled housing system. That's why, sorry for kind of confusion. EC means environmental controlled housing system scheme.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So one of the most important factor, just to kind of control the air movement or the ventilation inside the house. So what we have to do is, we have to provide fresh air into the house and take out whatever the air inside the house. basically it is, we call them stale air. So we can fresh air. එළියේ තියෙන fresh air එක අපි housing system එක ඇතුළට ගන්නවා. ඇතුළේ තියෙන use කරපු ඒ කියන්නේ සමහර carbon dioxide වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්, ammonia, maybe higher concentration of ammonia, maybe higher concentration of carbon dioxide, or maybe too dusty air inside the house. So we have to take that out and move fresh air into the house. Right? In addition, what we have to do is we have to take out unwanted or the excess heat that is already generated inside the house, and excess moisture, excess ammonia out of the house, and take fresh air into the house. What we have to do is we have to limit the building up of unwanted, or we call them hazardous or harmful gases. Right? We can have a pradhana de ventilation at the movement main objective එක තමයි fresh air එකගේ ඇතුළට ගන්න එක. ඒ ඇතුළේ තියෙන build up වෙලා තියෙන gas එක. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ gas එකේ තියෙන පුළුවන් harmful gases, ඒ hazardous වගේ ammonia, dusty, excess moisture, unwanted heat එක, ඒ ඔක්කොම අපි එළියට ගන්න එක තමයි කරන්නේ. That's what we call, we have to provide better ventilation in order to provide fresh air with full of oxygen. So birds needs very high amount of oxygen, because kind of when you are kind of rearing those animals in a confined area, closed confined area, air ratio maybe around 20% of oxygen, right? But when it's come to a confined, controlled environmental condition inside the house with lots of birds, that air ratio can be changed. Oxygen level එක අඩු වෙලා, CO2 level එක වැඩි වෙලා, ammonia level එක වැඩි වෙලා සත්තු uncomfortable වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක නිසා අපිට fresh oxygen සහිත air එක ඇතුළට provide කරන එක තමයි ventilation නැත්නම් air movement එක. Okay? So we can have different ventilation systems. We can go for a natural ventilation system. What we can do is we can let the fresh air flow into the house. So අර අපි ඉස්සෙල්ලා දැක්කර house එකේ short walls. We have short walls. What we can do is we can have wire meshes surrounding the walls. What happens is the fresh air comes in, and whatever the remaining air, or maybe whatever kind of build up air inside the house will flow away from the other side of the wall. Right? Or you can kind of think, when you kind of construct a house, to kind of build that house away from different windbreaks. අර මම ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්වා දැන් කැලෑම් මැද වගේ එකපාර ලොකු poultry house එකක් ගැහුවොත් එහෙම ටිකක් අර යාම movement එක block වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒක නිසා අපි ඒවා build කරනකොට අපි windbreaks, maybe අර සමහර ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඇති දැන් ඔය ලොකු මේ ලංකාවේ සමහර dry zone එකේ තියෙනවා සමහරලාට windbreaks. ඒ කියන්නේ කුඹුරු හරහා වුණත් අපි ගස් හිටවලා තියෙනවා. මොකද මේ අර ලොකු air flow එක අඩු කරාම නැත්තම් වෙන්නේ ගස් පෙරලෙනවා. කුඹුරු වල හොඳට හැදිලා යනකොට පරලත් එකම පහළට වැටෙනවා. ඒක අඩු කරන්න wind එකේ තියෙන බලපෑම අඩු කරන්න අපි brakes දාලා තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ ගස් හිටවලා තියෙනවා. මේ පඳුරු හිටවලා තියෙනවා. So when we are going to build a house, so you have to have at least some feet or distance away from those kind of windbreaks. Well, windbreaks තිබ්බොත් එහෙම මෙහෙම natural air movement එකක් වෙන්නේ. ඒක අපිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. කොහොමද අපි අවශ්‍ය කරන ventilation එක දෙන්නේ? So if we are kind of trying to provide or use of natural ventilation, you have to have those houses at least 100, maybe some feet away from natural or whatever the windbreaks available surrounding environment, right? So what you can do is, otherwise you can install some fans, or air exchange rate you can increase through installing some fan. So then what happens is it will enhance the airflow and air circulation inside the housing system. You have to have a better kind of proper building or construction design for those poultry houses, right? මොනවා කරත් කරන්නේ අපි හිතේ තිබ්බට මේ හැමදේම ඉම්ප්ලිමන්ට් කරගන්න ඕනේ අදාළ environmental condition එකක වගේ direction. So we have to think about the direction. කියන්නේ අපි දැන් ඉස්සෙල්ලා කතා කරා මෙන්න මේ direction එකට තිබ්බොත් හොඳයි මේ වගේ area එක මේ වගේ land එක. නමුත් ඒ house එක construct කරනකොට හිතන්න දැන් natural air movement එක තියෙන්නේ මේ පැත්තට නම් ඒතකොට මේකේ මේ main large side walls දෙක ඒක cover වෙන්න හදන්න හරියන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙනම් අනිත් පැත්තට ඒ කියන්නේ cross වෙන විදිහට අපි අර ලම්බක පැත්තට වෙන විදිහට හදන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට අර cross වෙලා යනවා air circulation එක අනිත් පැත්තට, right? So you have to think about those natural air movements, the wind direction surrounding the area when you are constructing a poultry house. You are consider කරන්නේ නැතුව හදුවම තමයි ප්‍රශ්නේ. So there are lots of kind of issues we can observe in Sri Lanka as well. The people are protesting, so they cannot bear the kind of smell coming through these farms. So the water is dirty, everything is kind of messed up because of improper housing conditions or improper housing design and construction, right? ඒ හැමදේම මම හිතන්නේ ගොඩාක් සරල දේවල් මම කියන්නේ. නමුත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ හැමදේ අපි ගියක් හදලා දුන්නත් අපි කියන්නේ වාස්තු බලනවා බස් නැහැටට දාන්න නැහැ කියනවා නැදින්කට මෙහෙමයි කියනවා ඔයගොල්ලෝ. සාමාන්‍ය සිංහල බෞද්ධ කට්ටිය ගොඩාක් ෆලෝ කරනවා කියන්නේ. ඒ හැමදේම ඒගොල්ලෝ හිතනවා. නමුත් අනිත් රටවල ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට සමහරලාට හිතනවා දැන් මේක විදිහට හිතන්න දැන්. සමහර රටවල් තියෙනවා ඒගොල්ලෝ සයික්ලෝන්ස් තියෙනවා. කියන්නේ ටොනේඩෝස් එනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒගොල්ලෝ බලන්නේ නැහැ මේ බස් නැහැටද නැගිටින්නද කොහෙද කියලා. ඒගොල්ලෝ බලන්නේ මොස්ලිම යා එන වෙන්ටිලේෂන් එක එහෙම නැත්නම් යා ෆ්ලෝ එකේ මිනිමම් ඩැමේජ් එක වෙන්න පුළුවන් කොහොමද මොන විදිහට හැදුවොත් අපි ඒව තමයි ඒ රටවල වෙන්නේ අපි හිතන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලා මේ පැත්තේ වෙන අර පැත්තේ නමුත් යම්කිසි බලපෑමක් තියෙනවා ඒක නැහැ කියනවා නෙමෙයි නමුත් ඒ හැමදේම දොරවල් දාන්න හොඳට ජනල් ඉර එළියෙන්න දාන්න හොඳට යා සර්කියුලේට් වෙන්න දාන්න වහලින් අමාර උස්සලා හදනවා so that is even for humans that's why we kind of constructing houses considering those natural ventilations airflow as well as sunlight everything so that's why we have to consider those kind of factors even for animals. සත්තුන් උනත් අපි හැමදේම හිතන්න ඕන අපිට ඉන්න බැරි නම් heated house එක සත්තු කොහොමද ඉන්නේ? right? අපි නම් 4-5 දෙනෙක් family එක සත්තු එකපාර 1000 2000 අපි දාලා තියෙනවා closed housing system එක. එතකොට සත්තු කොහොමද ඉන්නේ කියලා හිතන්න වෙනවා. right? So you have to think about those kind of factors. Or basically natural ventilation, if you use the natural ventilation, this is very easy, low cost because you don't need to use much of electricity in order to operate those kind of exhaust or kind of electric fans. And අපි දැන් natural ventilation එක තියෙන area එකක නම් අපි house එක අපි හරියට construct කරොත් අපිට කිසිම expense එකක් නැහැ කියන්නේ. වැඩිපුර වියදම් කරන්න ඕනේ අර artificial fans install කරලා ඒව operate කරලා air flow එක enhance කරන්න. Right? So in addition, there are some ventilation systems. For an example, you cannot go for kind of for the natural ventilation systems in hill country or maybe in up country or maybe in Nuareli area because it is too cold for those animals or those birds, right? You know, අපි natural ventilation එකට යන්න කියලා හිතන්න දැන් Nuareli පැත්තේ හදන poultry farm. The average temperature may be around 5 Celsius or maybe 10 Celsius maybe throughout the year. But the comfort temperature may be 20 to 30 for those, right? It can have natural macro environment Celsius 10. Now they go like comfort zone maybe 15 Celsius or maybe 20 or maybe even 25 most of the time. So you cannot have walls with this kind of natural ventilation for those birds, right? Because they need inside about 20, right? But outside it is 10, which means the airflow will offer, like this will happen naturally. But the thing is, birds are really uncomfortable because of low environmental temperature. So in that case, you have to have kind of closed housing system. ඒ වගේ වෙලාවට අපි මොකද්ද කරන්නේ? ඒ air එක එළියට මේ flush out කරගන්න, right? What you can do is you can have different systems, the mechanical ventilation systems, so we call them forced ventilation systems. What you can do is either you can create higher air pressure inside the house. Cut over higher pressure inside the house. What you can do is you can have fans to blow fresh air into the kind of inside the house. Higher pressure actually create karana. So you have higher pressure inside and lower pressure outside. What happens is air flow from high pressure to the low pressure, so air out from the house, right? Or what you can do is you can have a negative air pressure inside the house. What you can do is you can reduce or decrease the air pressure inside the house. You have to have fans. It can be fans high color අපි මේක කරන්නේ. high pressure එකක් create කරනවා. high pressure එක නිසා high pressure එකද low pressure එකට air එක move out වෙනකොට ඇතුළේ තියෙන අනවශ්‍ය air ටික ඔක්කොම අයින් වෙලා යනවා. එහෙම නැත්තම් කරන්නේ අපිට fresh air වැඩිපුර ඇතුළට ගන්න පුළුවන්. What we can do is you can create a negative pressure inside the house. What වෙන්නේ negative කියන්නේ අඩු pressure එක නේ. හැමතිස්සෙම ඉන්නේ වැඩි pressure එකකට අඩු pressure එකකට. ඇතුළට අඩු pressure එන්න පුළුවන්, right? So those kind of factors have to be considered, but they are kind of expensive because you have to have fans. These kind of fans should be installed inside the house based on your purpose in order to control the air movement inside those houses, right? හැමදේම කරද්දී capital expenditure එක වෙන්නේ. Natural environment එකෙන් අපි deviate වෙලා යනවා, right? Or even you can have this kind of tunnel ventilation. I think you might have seen, if you have been to a poultry or layer farm, they have very long houses and they have installed several, maybe 5, 10, sometimes even higher number of fans in these areas. Even if the kind of the house is very long, they have several fans here as well, in the middle of the house as well. You can මේ වගේ walls එක තියෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් house එක ගොඩාක් දිග house එකක්. නම් මේ මැදත් ඒ වගේ exhaust fans high කරලා තියෙනවා. Right? What happens is fresh air come from here because of the operation of these fans. Whatever the air accumulated inside will come out from these fans. Right? මේ වගේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලාද හරියට හොඳට ඔබ්සර්ව් කරලා තියෙනවා නම් poultry farm එක ලොකු farm එකක්. ඒගොල්ලන් මේ වගේ මේ tunnel ventilation system එකක් තියෙනවා. ගොඩාක් දිග නම් මේ මැදත් fans තියෙනකොට තවත් හොඳට efficiently ඇදලා දෙනවා යා එක එළියට ඇදලා ගන්න. මෙතනින් එනවා ඔක්කොම එළියට මෙතනින් fresh air ඇතුළට එනවා. Right? So those kind of systems, you can have different systems or those tunnel ventilation systems, right? So you can have install whatever the fans in one side and whatever the air can from the other come from other side of the wall, right? Or it can come from both sides. So you can see the fans are inside in the downside of the walls and whatever the air coming in areas are top of the higher side of the wall. And මේ වගේ උඩ පැත්තේ තියෙන්න පුළුවන් එයා ඇතුළට එන area එක fans එක තියෙන්න පුළුවන් යට. So what happens is because of that air movement, whatever the fresh air comes in from the top area and the bottom area, whatever the air inside house will come out. Right? It depends on the requirement and whatever the capital money you have, you can have different ventilation systems, right? The cross ventilations, the side ventilation, so you can have different grouping systems just to kind of support your ventilation system. Right? The manufacturer or the farmer, whatever the requirement he has, whatever the amount of money he has, so he can design the most effective ventilation system for their birds. So when you kind of see a kind of a mechanical ventilation system, you have to have exhaust fans. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලාද ගොඩක් වෙලාට අර ඉත්තිය වගේ හයි කරලා තියෙන කැමරා සිස්ටම් කැරකෙන fans තියෙනවා. ඒක ගොඩක් වෙලා temperature sensitive විදිහට හදලා තියෙනවා. නැත්නම් RH sensitive නැත්නම් air flow එක අනුව ඒතුලේ තියෙන condition එක අනුව ඒවා auto operate වෙන්න දානවා. Right? So they have the control systems, they have different heaters. heat එකක් ඇතුලේ තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. එයා දාලා temperature එක අනුව. So air flow එක ඒ හැමදේම වෙනම control කරලා තියෙනවා, install කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේ මේ කියන්නේ අනිවාර්යෙන් expensive with capital expenditure. You have to have fans, you have to have different control, the heaters. So that's because of you can control this fan, the speed. You can have or you can adjust whatever the ventilation speed inside the housing system. Or ඉක්මනට එළියට ගන්න ඕන ඔන්න adjust කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ control වලින් කොච්චර speed එකකින් මේ fan එක operate වෙනවද කොච්චර ඉක්මනට air flow එක එළියට යනවා. ඒ වගේම මේව අනිත් පැත්තට operate කරගන්න හදාගන්න පුළුවන් කොච්චර ඉක්මනට air flow එක ඇතුළට එන්න ඕන විදිහට. So it depends on the requirement. You just go through these kind of notes and get an idea. So we have to have a different the ventilation system based on our requirement for our birds. So might have seen these kind of fans, the outside fans. So these are the fans. Sometimes the inlet may be this one, and maybe this one may be the outlet. System. Two fans are so the same height. You need to have a kind of powerful ventilation systems in order to kind of take out whatever the fresh the stale air or the fresh air into the houses, right? This is kind of all openings. I think you might have seen in your houses as well. Just above the windows, you have different openings, right? That is not for kind of beauty or anything or aesthetic appearance. maybe a kind of aesthetic appearance, but just to kind of provide some openings for air movement. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඇති ගොඩක් අය බිත්ති උඩ ඔයගොල්ලෝගේ අපි ගෙවල් හදනවා උඩින් අර තියන්න පුළුවන් වාකවුරු කියලා. ඒ වගේ ආ ඉන්ලට්ස් අපිට තියන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ ඉන්ලට් සිස්ටම් එකත් අපි කරන්නේ සාමාන්‍ය ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අවශ්‍ය කරන air movement එක facilitate කරන්න. Right? You don't need to kind of remember these kind of stuff, but when these are the kind of designs just to provide, or inlets just to provide a better air movements into the house, right? Roof එක හරහා එහෙම ඉන්න හදලා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් wall එකේ මේ වගේ inlet එකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. So it can be closed based on the requirements. So based on the airflow, it may open wide and then it's closed. So ඒ වගේ එක විදිහට ඒවා හදලා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. The system එකේ airflow වෙන එක කොච්චර ප්‍රමාණයකට අපිට control කරගන්න ඕනද. You don't need to remember kind of the length, size or anything. No, just to get an idea, we have different kind of systems. So in poultry houses, so you have to have this kind of system with better movement inside the houses. Right? ඔයගොල්ලෝ නිකන් ගිහිල්ලා බැලුවා නම් ඔය improper house එක කොහොමද ඒ සත්තු ඉන්නේ කියලා ඔයගොල්ලන්ට feel කරන්න පුළුවන් කොච්චර ඒකවල stress එකකද ඉන්නේ කියලා. මොකද ඒ තරම් අමාරුයි. සත්තු 1000ක් විතර ඉන්නකොට එක තැනක ගොඩාක් හීට් එකක් එනවා. අපි උනත් ඕගලන්ට තේරෙන්නේ හරි රස්නේ දවසක අපිට එක ළඟ වාඩිලා බස් එකකවත් යන්න බෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ තරම් කියන්නේ ලොකු හීට් එකක් ජෙනරේට් වෙනවා, right? The small birds like yani small birds like so when you come to small animals or small birds like poultry or other animals, they have higher surface area to body mass, right? And body mass එක body එකේ size එකට සාපේක්ෂව higher surface area එකක් තියෙනවා. What happens is they efficiently kind of remove their body heat. Body heat what happens is when all the birds starting kind of removing their body heat at the same time, it will start accumulating inside the house. Again, අපි අපේ ඇඟවල අපි ඇඟ ලොකු වෙන්න body mass එකට සාපේක්ෂව body mass එක කියන්නේ body එකේ size එක සාපේක්ෂව surface area එක අපේ skin එකේ surface area එක අඩුයි. අපි ඔක බෙදලා ගත්තොත්. එහෙම වුණාම වෙන්නේ අපේ heat එක dissipate වෙනවා. Efficiency එක අඩු වෙනවා ගොඩක් වෙලා. නමුත් පොඩි සත්තු ගත්තාම උගේ body mass එකට සාපේක්ෂව surface area ගොඩක් වැඩි. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉක්මනට efficiently they just start dissipating their heat. What happens is if it is a closed environment, it will kind of accumulate inside the house. So it will kind of a very bad situation for those birds. So ultimately it will adversely affect, even they will die. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඇති සමහර heat waves so සමහර රටවල් ගැන අහලා බැලුවොත් එහෙම ඇමරිකාව වෙන්න පුළුවන් USA Australia සමහර New Zealand ඒ වගේ රටවල heat waves they have heat waves in summer month May June July in those months the temperature will go up to even 40 Celsius degrees. So what happens is if they don't have proper kind of air circulation or the ventilation system, so inside the house the temperature can go up to 50-60 Celsius degrees. So eventually the birds will die. ඔබට දැකලා මේ ළඟදී ලංකාවෙත් ඒ වගේ සිද්ධියක් වුණා. ඒක ළමයෙක් ඉඳලා ඒ ක්ලෝස් සිස්ටම් එකක් නේ. මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? හීට් එක ඔටෝමැටිකලි වැඩි වෙනවා. ළමයාක් දිනනවා ළමයාගේ ඇඟිනුත් හීට් එක යනවා. ආර්ගරත් වුණාම තවත් හීට් එක වැඩි වෙනවා. අන්තිමට හීට් එක කන්ට්‍රෝල් කරගන්න බැරුව සතා මැරෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් ඒ ළමයා මැරලා තිබ්බ ඒ වගේ නිවුස් බැලුවා නම් මම මාසෙක විතර වගේ උඩදී. So it's kind of a similar situation here. If it is a closed housing system, if you don't have any proper ventilation, ultimately what happens is the RH and temperature will affect and the birds will die. ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලා දන්නවද නැ temperature humidity index කියලා එකක් තියෙනවා. අපිට calculate කරන්න පුළුවන්. We can calculate the temperature humidity index, the temperature and RH use කරලා අපිට පුළුවන් calculate කරන්න value එකක්. ඒ value එක අනුව අපිට තීරණය කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ සතා කොච්චර stress එකකද heat stress එකකද ඉන්නේ කියලා. ඒක සත්තු ඊට අමතරව මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? The environment is full of other air, like ammonia, hazardous airs, maybe dust. The birds will suffer more. Right? Then the heaters. I think I talked a little about the heaters during the brooding of those birds. If you can remember, so we are providing heaters in order to provide any additional heating requirements for those animals, right? Because the brooding situation, definitely they need some heat, additional heat. In addition, during the what we call the winter months, or maybe the temperature. Even in Sri Lanka these days, you can see the temperature is very low early in the morning and in the midnight. So you have to have a better heating system in order to control their outside temperature, right? ඒක නිසා අපි ගොඩක් ලාට heaters පාවිච්චි කරන්න වෙනවා. Somebody is talking or maybe traveling, so just turn off. Okay, so okay, so then all kind of those things are basically controlled through automatic systems. So you can have this kind of, I think you have seen, or you are working in a farm, you can have this kind of controlled boxes or areas, so you can control all the environmental or the whatever the fans speed and air circulation, everything through one place. මේ වගේ system එකකට ගියාම හරි ලේසි. මොකද අපිට manually කිසිම දෙයක් control කරන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. We don't need to do anything manually. Everything is controlled through a system. However, in order to control these kind of things, you need to have a better electricity supply. So that's why I mentioned, like, we need to have a better or kind of a reliable electrical supply for these works. We are going to kind of plan a housing system for all, right? Okay, so the other one is the insulation process. So you need to have a kind of better insulation kind of system for those birds if the environmental is kind of micro-environmental is controlled in those houses. So in modern housing systems, you can see kind of to control the outside cold weather or maybe even high temperatures outside. So because in some cases you have to provide, you have to lower inside temperature. You can understand outside temperature. We have to provide additional cooling system, cooling environment inside the houses. So in order to kind of provide that temperature, you have to have a closed, well-insulated housing system. Otherwise, you have to spend more energy if additional energy is wasted through these kind of walls, right? You can make walls insulate insulate වෙලා තිබ්බේ නැත්නම් එන්නේ අපි හිතන්න ඇතුළේ ටෙම්පරේචර් එක අඩු කරන්න හරි වැඩි කරන්න නම් අපි කරන්නේ එක්ස්ට්‍රා එනර්ජි එකක් අපි යූස් කරනවා, right? ඒ එක්ස්ට්‍රා එනර්ජි එක වේස්ට් වෙන්න පුළුවන් අපි හරියට ඉන්සුලේට් කරලා තිබ්බේ නැත්නම් housing system, right? So for that you can have the sprinkler system in order to control your cooling or the inside temperature inside the houses. So specifically in dry zone or very dry climate, you can have the sprinkler systems, or maybe fogging system, or maybe the pad system. So we will be kind of briefly see what are the differences, the sprinklers, fogging, or maybe the pad system for these operator cooling methods, right? You can have these kind of foggers, or like foggers, mistake වගේ අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ දානවා මේ සත්තුන්ට මේ outside temperature එක නැත්නම් inside temperature එක ගොඩාක් අමාරු නම් control කරගන්න සත්තුන්ට ඕන කරන comfort zone එක දෙන්න උනා අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ගන්න fogging. කියන්නේ පොඩි ඉඳන් mist එක වගේ විනාඩි 5කට සැරයක් 10කට සැරයක් අපි when we consider about the outside temperature, we control what we kind of see what is the targeted temperature or the RH inside the house. So we just operate these foggers based on our requirement, right? Even sprinklers, you can operate these on the top of roof. We may sprinklers ගොඩක් වෙලාට මේක ඇතුලේ operate කරන්න සත්තු නිකන් අර හේදිලා නැවිලා යනවනේ එහෙම වුණොත් එහෙම. So if we want to use sprinklers, what we usually do is we fix them on the top of the roof, and then it start sprinkling, and then water will fall onto the roof. සාමාන්‍ය sprinkler system එකේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට යන්නේ වහලේ උඩ හයි කරලා තියෙනවා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා තියෙන සමහර ඔය dry zone එකේ තියෙන farms වල වතුර වැටෙනවා ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ හොඳට heat එක තියෙන වෙලාවට. ඒක කරන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට temperature control කරන්න වහලේ cool කරනවා. වහලේ cool කරාම එතනින් පල්ලෙහා තියෙන ටිකක් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට cool, right? So cooling system you can install inside the houses as well. It's like a mist, very smaller, fine water particles. So it will kind of provide a better environmental condition or the microenvironmental conditions inside the houses. If the outside temperature is very high or the if the heating is very high, the outside, specifically in summer month scale of May, June, July, August or early August in other countries, even though we don't have those seasonal variations, but still our temperatures are really high during the May, June and July, even in Sri Lanka as well, right? So you know about that, right? So in order to control the temperatures inside, so we can have augers or mist system, right? Then the pad system, though we call them evaporative cooling pads. So we can have, I think you have seen even in other kind of, not in even farms, but in the large buildings, on the top of the roof or maybe even outside the buildings, you can see there are some kind of structures always kind of flowing waters. You can water හැමතිස්සෙම වැටෙනවා වතුර ටැංකිය ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඇති එළිය තියෙන සිස්ටම් එකක්. ගොඩාක් ලොකු buildings වල තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ තට්ටු ලොකු buildings වල. So they are called like evaporative cooling pads. They install these kind of pads. They are very expensive, but just to kind of provide better microenvironmental conditions for those animals inside those houses, right? You can have different systems, but based on your capital or capital investment, you can have this kind of cooling systems for those parts. So I think I have, no, these kind of feeding systems. So you have seen, or you might see these kind of silos. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා මේ වගේ big silos තියෙනවා farm එක එළියේ. ගොඩක් වෙලාවට poultry farms වල ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා තියෙනවා, dairy farms වලත් තියෙනවා නැත්තේ නෑ. But in poultry farms, they are very automated systems. So they have these kind of silos with different ingredients, right? What happens is when you want to feed them, you take those feeders and then you fill these different hoppers with different types of feeds, and they are mixed together and distributed among the animals, right? Then we only feeders here. Outside with them, manually you do it manually. Whatever the feed you want to feed these animals, what you do is you just put them into these coffers and then you start moving from here to the other place. You automatically do your moving. These are the feeders. Right? You have feeders as well as waterers. They are very automated. So even in Sri Lanka, you can see this kind of automated system because, as I mentioned last week, we have one of the sophisticated, well-developed poultry management system even in South Asia or even in the world. ලංකාවේ හොඳ management system එකක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් දැන් පොඩි ප්‍රශ්න ඇති වෙලා තිබ්බට මේ economic crisis එකත් එක්ක. So we are having one of the best management systems in the world, right? Because we were self-sufficient, we were producing all the eggs, we were producing all the meat that we need with very low price. But however, with the current economic situation, we are having some bad issues, but still the system is there. Right? The system we have these kind of silos, these kind of automated feeding systems, automated watering systems, and everything in the poultry farms. So these are the different feeders and waterers. So basically, you can have this kind of automated. You can automated level systems. Fix කරලා තියෙනවා මේ බටේ දිගේ automatically දිගට හදලා තියෙන බටේ ඒ වාර automatically ඕන කරන ප්‍රමාණය fill වෙනවා. ඒ සත්තු මෙතනින් කනකොට අඩු වෙනකොට ඒ difference එක අනුව මෙතෙන්ට automatically fill වීමක් වෙනවා. Even you can have these kind of feeders. These are manual feeders. These are kind of hanging type. ඔයාලට එල්ලලා තියන්න පුළුවන්. These are also hanging type. එල්ලලා තියෙන එක තමයි මැද තැන් වල කරන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලා. මේවා නම් automated, but if it is not automated, the feeders are in equal distance inside these farms, right? These are the waterers. Waterers are also kind of automated. So they have sprinklers or drinkers like this, nipple drinkers. These are also kind of automated drinkers. මේවා නිකන් nipple drinkers කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඇවිල්ලා කට තිබ්බාම පුෂ් කරාම වතුර බින්දු 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 වගේ වැටෙනවා. මේක මේ nipple drinkers නෙමෙයි. නමුත් මෙතන ප්‍රෙෂර් එක අනුව වතුර අඩු වෙන ප්‍රමාණය අනුව මෙතෙන්ට ඔටෝමැටිකලි වතුර පිරෙනවා. මෙන්න මේ පොඩි ඒරියා එක. right? මේ හදලා තියෙන එක nipple drinkers. Right? මේ තියෙන feeder, this is the feeder in the water. So you can see they have kind of equal or maybe at least some distance in between those two lines because just to avoid any contamination. ඉතින් මේ water line එකයි මේක එක ළඟ තිබ්බලන් ඉන්නේ මුන් කනවා බොනවා හැමතිස්සෙම මෙතන සවුත් වෙලා විනාශ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. But they eat here and they come here and they drink water over here. Right? So they have nipple drinkers or maybe these kind of automated drinkers or even these kind of manual or fountain drinkers. මේකදී අපිට තියෙන එක විශ්ව එක තමයි manually අපිට ඔක්කොම control කරන්න වෙන්නේ. So these are kind of fully automated water lines. What we can do is, if you want to provide any medication, I will be discussing some diseases in the next lecture. So you can see there are some major issues with animal health. So if you want to provide any kind of medication, and then වතුරත් එක්ක ඔයගොල්ලන්ට දෙන medication එකක් තියෙනවා. What you can do is, you can mix with water and send it through this line. මේ line එක දිගේම යවන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. So they come and drink. So both time they get water as well as medication. වතුරේ දිය වෙලා යන මොන හරි තියෙනවා නම් අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන් එකම දේ තමයි මේ වගේ සක් පම්ප් එකක් හරහා ඒක මික්ස් කරන්න පුළුවන් water line එක. ඒ water line එක පම්ප් කරනකොට automatically සත්තු ඇහිලා බොනකොට මේ automated drinkers and nipple drinkers හරහා ඒගොල්ලන්ට medication එක යනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් what you have to do is you have to manually use this kind of medication to each animal. It is really difficult, but there are places still they are doing that one because if they have very higher number of laborers, they do it manually, but this is very easy. මොනවාරි වතුර දිය කරලා දෙන එක ගන්න ටක් කරලා වතුර දිය කරා සක් කරලා දුන්නා මේ water line එකට water line එක කරා automatically distribute වෙලා යනවා. This is kind of a egg collection. This is also automated. This is kind of the cage or the battery system. What happens is they just lay eggs and then automatically collected into these conveyor belts and they are automatically flowed into the processing areas or the storage area. Right? මේ වගේ system එකකට ගොඩාක් දුරට ගියාම වාසිය තියෙන එක we don't need laborers, many laborers. We need laborers, but normal manual collection, if you need 100 laborers, we can manage all the process maybe 10-15 laborers with this kind of system. මේ වගේ system එකක් යනකොට medication automated, watering automated, feeding automated. එතකොට අපිට laborers ප්‍රමාණය අඩු කරන්න පුළුවන්. අඩු කළා full automated system එකක කිසි කාර්යයක් නැතුව efficiently වැඩ කරගෙන යන්න පුළුවන්. This is kind of overall showing of fully automated or the system. So you can see through the computer how the temperature is controlled, the relative humidity, the ammonia level inside the barn, the water level, the food level. So you can check everything maybe in a remote distance. ලොකු area එකක් මේ කොහොමද වෙන්නේ හැමදේම ඔයගලන්ට office එකක වෙන room එකක හැමදාම ගෙදර ඉඳලා හරි බලන්න පුළුවන් how they are operating. Because everything is fully automated, so you have to have few laborers just to observe whether they are kind of functioning properly, but otherwise you can have everything fully automated. Right? The temperature, relative humidity, ammonia, water, these kind of systems, it's better to have this kind of closed monitoring system because these birds are highly susceptible to different diseases. Right? මේ වගේම කුරුල්ලෝ ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් ඔය avians කියන ගණේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය ගොඩාක් වෙලාට diseases වලට highly susceptible. Chicken and broilers කියලා කිසි වෙනසක් නැහැ. They are also under the same avian group, so they are very highly susceptible to diseases. Right? මොකද විතන්න birds ලා මේ වගේ 100 ගාණක් ඉන්න එකකට මොකක් හරි fowl pox මොකක් හරි ගම් disease එකක් මේකට විතන්න bird flu කියලා එකෙක්ට හැදුනොත් මේක විනාඩි 10ක් 15ක් ඇතුළත virus නම් ටක් ගාලා spread වෙලා යනවා. Right? It can be spreaded very fast because highly dense or highly populated birds inside the house. Therefore, we should have to have very minimum human interaction. Human interaction එකක් කරන්න කියන්නේ මොකද නේ මොකද humans ලා වැඩ හිතන්නේ අපි එක පුද්ගලයෙක් ඉන්නේ මැනේජර් කෙනෙක් නම් ඉන්නේ. ඒ මැනේජර් බ්‍රොයිලර් ෆාම් එකකටත් යනවා. ලේයර් ෆාම් එකකටත් යනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ග්‍රෝවර් ෆාම් එක පැටව හම්බෙන එකකටත් යනවා. හැචරියෙත් ඉන්නවා. ස්ටාර්ටර් එකෙත් ඉන්නවා. ග්‍රෝවර් එකෙත් ඉන්නවා. ෆිනිෂර් එකෙත් ඉන්නවා. ලේයර් ස්ටේජ් එකෙත් ඉන්නවා. ඒතර හැම එකටම මෙයා ඔබ්සර්ව් කරලා දවස් ඇතුළත travel කරනවා නම් එක තැනක ඉන්න disease එක ඊළඟ මේ පෙන් එකන හවුස් එකට යනකොට අරගෙන යන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක තමයි අර මං ඉස්සෙල්ලා කිව්ව ෆුඩ් බාත් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. මේ වගේ සිස්ටම් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. Okay. So we have some farms like this, the fully automated, everything is automated, controlled, but majority of the farms are still manually operated because we have some laborers and in order to support that laborers as well, so we have, because this is very high cost, the initial cost is very high, the maintenance cost is very high, but minimum involvement of labor and high biosecured areas, right? The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have proper electricity supply, or if you are unsure about continuous supply, you have to have this kind of generators, you know about that one, in order to maintain this kind of fully automated system. And ඒකයි issue එක. ගන්න electricity මොකුත් නැත්නම් අපිට ඕන විදිහට ඒක ගන්න නැත්නම් මේ වගේ generator එකක්වත් තියාගෙන ඉන්න වෙනවා. නමුත් it is very costly. You have to have some money for whatever the fuel that needs to operate these kind of machines. Therefore, you better develop or select a location, you can have a better or continuous or trust supply of electricity as well as water for these animals or the farms, right? Then the lighting system, so you can have different lighting systems, the fluorescent light or whatever the available sophisticated light. So basically, the roof is the place we fix or fit lights for these houses in the modern housing systems. So we have to provide the desired intensity as well as the duration of light. If you can remember, as I mentioned a short while ago, you have to have at least 16 hours of light for the broilers, at least during the initial stage, and for the layers, 16 to 17 hours of light per day. That is to enhance the feed intake as well as ultimately the egg laying capacity or the intensity of those animals. Finally, what you have to have is a well biosecured area and well waste management system inside the farm. Right? But that is an issue because they will generate a lots of waste. Not the feces, not the uric acid, but still if you have a broiler processing farm, you have lots of waste materials, right? The used water, the feathers and everything is inside the farm. So you have to have better or well waste management system. Otherwise, what happens is it will adversely affect the environment as well as there will be a lots of kind of protest from the people or the surrounding peoples or the residents against these kind of farming systems, right? And farmers ලා මේ වගේ හරියට කරේ නැත්නම් හොඳ waste management system එකක් නැත්නම් ඉතින් අපි use කරන water දැන් අපි broiler processing අපි ගිය සතියේ කතා කරා processing වලට use කරන water හරියට treat කරලා අපි මේ dispose කරේ නැත්නම් ඒවා natural habitats වලට යනවා නම් natural water lines වලට යනවා නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඒ whole environment එක whole biosystem එකම adversely affect වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වෙලාවට තමයි ගොඩක් අය protesting පටන් ගන්න මිනිස්සුන්ගේ. මෙන්න මේ වගේ අර ඒ animal farm එකකින් දැන වෙන but ඔයගොල්ලෝ අර වැලි ඒරියා පැත්තේ අර අවුරුදු කිහිපෙක ඉස්සෙල් වෙච්ච සිද්ධිය මතක නම් ඒත් වගේ factory එක හරියට waste treatment එකක් වෙන්නේ නැතුව ඒ ආලාලේ waste එක. So it's the same thing can happen here. So you have to have a proper plan how you are going to manage or dispose waste, right? So that's why I think last week I mentioned you have to have a large area to develop or build a proper housing system. Okay, so with that I can finish the housing systems for the poultry. So what I can do is like I did for the last week. Anyway, I will summarize the most important factors for the poultry housing systems and I upload that one. So for the examination, please try to go through only that slides or that lecture notes, right? For the අනවශ්‍ය විදිහට නිකන් time එක spend කරන්න එපා. මම දන්න ඕගොල්ලෝ busy ඕගොල්ලන් අනිත් වැඩත් වෙනවා jobs කරනවා හිම ඉන්න නිසා මම summarize කරලා මම ඒක upload කරන්නම් අර main topics යටතේ. Maybe if because some students ask me, can I submit the complete lecture series? So I will kind of create a separate place or separate, I don't know, whatever the link or something. So then I can upload whatever the full lecture materials into those areas, but if you have time, you can just go through it. But better to go through all the summarized lecture notes in order to study for your examination, right? ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ එක්සෑම් එක ඒක මට අහන්න බෑ සතිය කීයකින්ද තියන්නේ සතියකින් වගේද තිබ්බේ ගිය පාර ශෂිනිස්. ඒ කියන්නේ ලෙක්චර්ස් දෙකම ඉවරලා සති දෙකක් වගේ දුන්නද පාඩම් කරගන්න කොහොමද දන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලන් දුන්නේ?
2 weeks given, I think.
2 weeks, right? Okay. So if it, I think it should be sufficient enough for you guys to kind of study. So I will upload and based on your preference, you go with the short notes or the summarized lectures or whatever the lectures I posted or I conduct in the class. So you can prefer whatever you like, but I think to save your time and to kind of get a good grade, you better go through at least those summarized lecture notes, right? ඉතින් චුට්ටක් ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් හිතලා බලන්න. ඔයගොල්ලෝ කැමති නම් ඉගෙන ගන්න කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. සමහර ලෙක්චර් නෝට් වල ටිකවත් අඩුම ගන්න ඉගෙන ගන්න නැත්නම් එක්සෑම් එක හරියට කරගන්න බැහැ. So do you need any break or just shall I continue with the other section? Or maybe 5 minutes break or something, because this is kind of, I don't know how to say it, it's kind of mainly on diseases and it is a little bit complicated section. But anyway, I need to summarize this one definitely. And I will upload this one to you guys. But don't worry, because there will be some terms, they are very kind of strange or very advanced terms, but you don't need to remember anything. But whatever you need to remember, I will upload in the LMS. However, if you need any kind of additional supplementary materials, you can just refer these materials. Because I put these things, otherwise summarize එකක් කළා මේක කරන්න බෑ. ඒක නිසා මම මේ ඔක්කොම ටික දාලා තියෙනවා. මගේ flow එක මට හදාගෙන ගිය හැකි. But for your examinations, I will summarize and let you know. Right? මේක slides මම හිතන්නේ 90කට වගේ ආසන්න ගානක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් 90ම ඉදිරියට කරගෙන යන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ skip කරන සමහර areas. If you need any break, I can give you maybe 5 minutes break, so then you can start fresh. අවුල කමක් නැද්ද එහෙම?
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
So I'll be talking about the diseases kind of associated with poultry. So there will be plenty of diseases that I'll be discussing, kind of common diseases associated with poultry. So if somebody asks you to define what is a disease, it is kind of a condition that is deviation from normal function. So some disease simply define normal condition normal level එකෙන් deviate වෙන condition එකකට තමයි අපි සාමාන්‍ය disease එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ. So normally somebody asked, or maybe in the examination, so what is a disease means is kind of a condition that results in deviation from normal function of an animal, right? So it is called a disease. So in order to kind of get a disease, what happens is you have to have a host as an environment and agent. So it is kind of interconnected, right? Host animal, you have to have a host animal, and the agent comes and invade the host, and the environment should support that condition, right? Again, අපි ලෙඩක් හරි මොකක් හරි හැදෙන්න host කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. host කියලා කියන්නේ අපි. දැන් මගේ මට ලෙඩක් හැදෙනවා. මට හෙම්බිරිස්සාවක් වුණාට එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි කොරෝනා වෛරස් එකක් හරි හැදෙන්න නම් so මම තමයි host animal. So the agent, whatever the disease comes and invade me, invade කියන්නේ මාව ඇතුළට හරි ඇඟට ඇතුල් වෙනවා කියන්නේ. And it's not the only kind of thing that needs kind of enhance the condition. The environment should support those two factors, the host and agent. Agent I, host I, agent is specifically environmental condition support කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ disease එක එක්ක වැඩි වෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් අනිත් පැත්තෙන් host support කරනොත් එහෙම host අනුව agent ව පරාද්දලා යාට normal function එකට යන්න පුළුවන්, right? So you have to have the agent, the host and the environment for kind of spread the disease from one animal to another animal. Agent හැවිලා invade කරලා වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එයාට තියෙන environment එක supportive නැත්නම්. එයා හොඳ immunity එකක් තියෙන හොඳ සතෙක් නම් host කෙනෙක් නම් agent එච්චර powerfully එයාට survive වෙන්න බෑ. But on the other hand, if the host has a very low immune conditions, very low immunity, what happens is the agent can establish well inside the host and start multiplication and spreading the disease among other animals. So everything depends on the environment and the virulence of the agent and the condition of the host. One factors තුන තමයි ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් බලපාන්නේ. ඒක තමයි අපි අර environmental control කරන one of the method is control the environment is to provide a better housing system for those animals, right? What happens is if the environmental system is very bad, it will enhance the number of agents that may create the diseases and it will adversely affect the host animal, right? ඕක තමයි ඔය තුනම interconnected වෙලා තමයි තියෙන්නේ normal environment එක ඇතුලේ. ඕක අපිට උනත් එකයි. වෙනසක් නැහැ. host විදියට උතන කුකුලෙක් නෙමෙයි අපේ පිච් එකක් දාගත්තත් ඔච්චරම වෙන්නේ. ඒ අදාළ environmental එක අනුව තමයි අපි environment එක අනුව disease එකට susceptible ද නැද්ද කියලා decide වෙනවා, right? So what are the basic kind of agents for a disease? There are infectious agents and non-infectious agents. Agents, they are kind of basically infectious, are the bacteria, viruses, parasites and fungi, right? ඔයගොල්ලෝ නම් හොඳට මහලා තියෙනවා bacteria ලා ඉන්නවා, viruses තියෙනවා, parasites ලා ඉන්නවා, fungi. ඔන්න ඔය කට්ටිය තමයි ගොඩක් කරලා infectious. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට ලෙඩක් හදන්න පුළුවන් තත්ත්වයේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය. සාමාන්‍ය සජීවී විදිහට ඉන්න කට්ටිය. So non-infectious maybe ඒක කෙලින්ම disease එකට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ chemical, there are different chemicals that we use inside the farm, physical barriers or physical kind of structures vitamins and minerals, toxins. So based on those kind of factors, those are the ones that they are considered as non-infectious agents for a disease or the etiology, right? So what are the general signs of a disease? So what are the main signs that we are having some issues inside our body, or some health issues? Poor appetite. Poor appetite කියලා කියන්නේ අපි appetite එක කියන්නේ කැමරේ තියෙන රුචිය. අපි රුචිකම කියලා කියන්නේ ආසාව. So it's go down, right? The willingness to eat. යන්න එක ගොඩක් කරලා අඩු වෙනවා. So the depression, stunting, right? The poor uniformity, right? Some issues with the feathers, the coughing, sneezing, right? You don't need to remember everything, but just try to kind of remember some factors. What are the general signs of a disease for poultry birds or even any other animals? The mortality කියලා කියන්නේ මරණ ප්‍රමාණය ප්‍රතිශතය. So in general, in a poultry farm, we usually say, okay, the mortality, what is the mortality rate of your farm? What the farm mortality rate? So it says, okay, 5%, 10%, 15%. You can සත්තු 100ක් ගත්තොත් සත්තු කීයක් මැරෙනවද? ඒක තමයි mortality rate කියලා කියන්නේ. So if the rate is very high, maybe more than 5%, which means something wrong with the management inside the farm, right? Or if you see some blood on the litter, or the litter is very wet, so there is something issue with, you can litter ගත්තම ගොඩාක් තෙතයි නිකන් feces material slimy ගතිය වෙන්නේ, blood there, or maybe some difficulties in breathing, you can හුස්ම ගන්න අමාරු තියෙන, or maybe some kind of a discharge through their nose or nasal discharge, right? So we can kind of see outside, okay, something wrong with these animals or these birds, right? So you have to kind of observe different factors. So just to see whether the animals are doing good. For an example, if something wrong with their feed intake, okay, one animal eats maybe 100 grams per day. Maybe he or she is eating maybe 100 grams per day for 7 days, and suddenly stop eating maybe 50 grams per day, or then we start to drop again maybe 25 grams a day, or maybe eventually she or he is not eating at all. Maybe that's the wrong with some disease conditions. So you have to kind of concern about it and observe very thoroughly for all the birds what's going on inside their bodies or inside their kind of health condition situation, right? You හැමතිස්සෙම හරියට බලන්න ඕනේ. ඒක නිසා තමයි කියන්නේ, that's why we say, okay, fully automated systems are really good, but manual labor should be there just to observe those animals. අපිට cameras තියෙනවා, camera දාලා බලන්න පුළුවන්, but there are some limitations of using the CCTV cameras as well. Therefore, there should be a supervisor dedicated for different places just to observe whether the animals are doing good or whether they are in good health and they are under very good welfare conditions, right? So when it comes to the viral diseases, I think I mentioned you last time several vaccines that we usually give, right? So we have several diseases, the viral diseases, the Marx disease, the Newcastle disease, we call IBB, Gamboro, Gamboro killer vaccine, the fowl fox. There are different kind of viral diseases that we can observe in poultry animals, right? So maybe it's better at least to remember some names, not all kind of infectious bursal disease maybe IB or gumbo. At least try to remember those kind of terms. I know it's really difficult for the students like at your level or maybe even undergraduate level. There are some terms it's really difficult to remember, but try to remember at least few diseases just to compare, because when you learn something you have to kind of do some time to understand some difficult terms as well. But I know it is difficult, but try to remember at least few diseases, right? I will go through each, not for all, but some of these diseases, right? Then the bacterial diseases, right? So there are different bacteria, specifically I think the coliform, you can remember those kind of terms, the tuberculosis, paratuberculosis, right? The typhoid, the fowl typhoid and fowl cholera, pasteurellosis. So those are kind of these diseases that go to the avian tuberculosis, right? The avian tuberculosis. Avian killer is specifically those diseases, bacterial diseases are specifically for the birds, right? Over that tuberculosis, TB killer it's a human startup, right? Eka disease right? So that the causative agents may be different. Maybe the species that is responsible for causing the disease is different for avians or the birds and compared to the humans, right? So that's why we mentioned specifically the fowl. Fowl means it's also bird. The simple term is the fowl can birds the typhoid fowl typhoid. Must have had the fowl typhoid, right? So something like that. So you have to remember those kind of stuff. No, make it fowl in a term, avian in a term, is specifically done. Right? Then the protozoan diseases, right? So maybe you might have heard the malaria. So the avians, so the birds, they have a separate one called the avian malaria, the coccidiosis. How do we coccidiosis? Coccidiosis, coccidiosis, right? Then the fungal diseases, right? The pneumonia, the aflatoxin, or the term aflatoxin killer. Aflatoxicosis killer, whenever they are able to have it, right? They diseases varga theory, right? So if I ask you a kind of a question at I may ask you select the protozoan disease out of these answers, right? For an example, coccidiosis කියන උත්තරෙත් එක්ක අව මේ වගේ නිදවල් දෙක කොයි මේකෙන් එකක් වගේ දාලා අහන්න පුළුවන්. අන්න ඒක නිසා මම කියන්නේ චුට්ටක් මතක තියාගන්න කොහොමද මොනවද few examples. protozoan disease එක මොකද්ද? fungal disease එක කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? මෙතන දෙකක් වගේ තමයි කොහොමද දීලා තියෙන්නේ. අන්න ඒව චුට්ටක් මතක තියාගන්න. නැත්නම් මම කවදාකවත් එක පාට අහන්නේ නැහැ. මේ මේකේ මොකද්ද specific ම කට්ටිය කවුද මේක ලෙඩේ හදන්නේ? මෙන්න මෙහෙම කියලා එහෙම අහන්න ඒක ටිකක් අමාරුයි. Undergraduate level but at least try to remember what are the main bacterial diseases, what are the main viral diseases. I will summarize, right? Even though I have mentioned maybe 10, 12 viral diseases, I will summarize what are the main viral diseases, at least some names that you should remember, right? During this course. Maybe the diseases maybe the Marx disease, fowl fox, Gamboro, Newcastle disease. ඔය හතරවත් වගේ මතක තියාගන්න කියලා මම කියන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ මම දාලා දෙන්න slide එකක. එතකොට ඒ ටිකවත් අනිවාර්යෙන් මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ, right? Then the bacterial disease, the same thing. I will select the most important significant diseases and mention in the summary slide, right? Then the protozoan diseases as well, the fungal disease. Okay, so when it comes to parasitic disease, so there are two types, right? The internal parasites and the external parasites. So parasites like it was again and actually in the worms one. So internal ones are the round worms, tapeworms. So the external ones are the lice, mites, the bugs. So those are the external parasites. Parasite we can separate it into two groups, saying the internal ones and the external ones, right? So in addition to those kind of factors, like for an example, the diseases can be caused by some agents like bacteria, virus, protozoa, the parasites, and the nutritional deficiencies also can lead to some diseases, right? So there are some examples here: the cirrhosis, dermatitis, the paralysis, right? So they diseases mainly agents not because of bacteria, not because of virus, not because of protozoa or fungi, mainly because of some deficiencies in nutrition, right? The fatty liver kidney syndrome, right? Some mineral deficiencies, right? Even issues diseases minerals vitamins even some enzymes සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්න ඔය වගේ මිනරල්ස් ඕනේ වයිටමින්ස් ඕනේ. ඒතකොට ඒව නැති වුනහම ඇඟ ඇතුලේ වෙන ක්‍රියාකාරකම් නැති වුනහම ඉතින් ඩිසීස් එකක් විදිහට එළියට පෙනෙන්න පුළුවන්. right? What are the other diseases? There are some diseases we cannot categorize under those factors, like for an example, bacteria, virus, or nutritional diseases. So those are called the miscellaneous ones. The cannibalism. Cannibalism I mentioned last time. So we are going for debeaking, or we trim the beak. So that's it, just to kind of prevent the cannibalism. And cannibalism right? So those kind of conditions are called miscellaneous conditions, right? So when it comes to the Newcastle disease, or we call them NCD, who are the one that correct NCD? The short form NCD, but the long term is called Newcastle disease, right? So when it comes to poultry, it is one of the. How the?
Ranicot කියන disease එකද මේ Newcastle disease කියන්නේ?
Ranicot කියන එක මට චුට්ටක් මතක නෑ. Yes, you are correct. Yeah. So yeah, the other term is for the Ranicot, for the Newcastle disease. Actually, yes, you are correct. So, so I will update that one too. So it is kind of a viral disease, if you can remember under the categorization, right? So it is one of the most important diseases. So that's why I think you can remember last time, I think, so that I have that. Okay. So this is kind of a vaccination and disease control that I was yeah. So this is kind of a one that I was mentioning. So these are kind of most important ones. So the Marek's disease, NCD, IBD, or the Gumboro, NCD, these vaccines. So it is one of the kind of disease vaccine that
okay, sir.
Share another.
No, sir, we can't see the slides.
Oh, okay, sorry, I will share it. I think now you can see it, right?
Oh, okay, sir.
Okay. So yeah, because NCD or the Newcastle disease is one of the most important diseases. So that's why usually we start like the vaccination and disease control process at very early stage for these animals, right? So that's what I was kind of highlight. So the Marek's, the NCD vaccine, I think I talked about this one last time, and the IBD or the Gumboro. So those are most important one at the initial stage of those animals, right? Yeah, so when it's come to this disease, the NCD1, so the chicken is kind of a naturally the host for this disease, but other poultry species such as the ducks and turkeys, they are also basically the host for, but the most important one is for the chicken, right? The out of poultry species. So you can see different signs. That's what I have explained earlier for the common signs of disease. The base thing is one of the characters, they kind of start decreasing the feed intake or the loss of appetite. And you can see some diarrhea. It's basically kind of greenish one. So greenish diarrhea you can observe. So if you see greenish diarrhea or yellow color kind of diarrhea, it is one of the signs of NCD. And even the mortality rate, the death rate, single term product explain karna. So mortality and the death rate is really high in an acute outbreak. Acute just acute and chronic. Just when they are can. So you can observe those kind of signs under these conditions, specifically the Newcastle disease, right? So in addition, you can, if you see a bird like this, it can be the paralysis, the legs are paralyzed, and what do you call the head? Your head umbrella so so basically a symptom for Newcastle disease, right? So for an example, in examination, if I show you this kind of a picture, right? So you should be able to kind of identify, okay, something he is talking about this disease or the Newcastle disease, or maybe for any other disease, or maybe if I show you these two pictures, maybe this one and maybe this one, and then I give you different names of disease, and then ask you which one is responsible for this kind of symptoms, you have to select the Newcastle disease or NCD or maybe or any other disease also. I can do the same thing, but this is kind of give you some example for you guys, right? So this is kind of the same character, the greenish diarrhea. If you see some greenish or the yellow color diarrhea, is kind of a result from the Newcastle disease, right? So if you kind of kill, or not kill, but if you do the post-mortem analysis, you can see some hemorrhages. Hemorrhages can be lay pallang wage kina adahasa api samani pachana term ekak. So hemorrhagic ulcers in the intestine as well as in the proventricular glands, right? So golana mataka nan ara poultry ki mama structure e golanga ara digestive tract එක ගැන කතා කරලා. So proventricular, so those areas, so you can see these kind of lesions or the hemorrhage. Hemorrhage කියන්නේ blood අපි කියන්නේ ලේ වීමක් වගේ පොඩි ලේ මේ කාන්දු වීමක් වගේ මෙන්න වගේ පැල්ලම් ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒකත් ප්‍රධාන ලක්ෂණයක් ඔය Newcastle disease එක, right? Right. Then the ulcers. So you can see some ulcers කියන්නේ නිකන් කොහොමද කියන්නේ තුවාල වගේ චූටි අපි කියන්නේ බඩේ අර නිකන් අපි කියන්නේ gastritis වගේ හැදුනා. Some gastritis, we have some ulcers, so small wounds inside our stomach, even in the small and large intestine area. So similar kind of characteristics, so we can observe in these birds if they have infected with Newcastle disease, right? මම බයින්ඩර් මම ටික අමාරු පික්චර්ස් දාන්න දැම්ම නිකන් අර මේ වගේ නිකන් අර ක්ලියර් ඔයාලට අයිඩෙන්ටිෆයි කරගන්න පුළුවන් පික්චර්ස් එකක් හෝ දෙකක් වගේ තමයි දාන්නේ. ඒකෙන්ද බයින්ඩ් එපා සමහර පික්චර්ස් ක්ලියර් කියලා බය වෙන්න එපා. But when if I put a picture for the examination, it will be clear picture that is you can easily identify which disease that I am talking about, right? So these kind of ulcers, the intestine, you can observe if they are kind of infected with CV disease if you do the postmortem analysis. So these are kind of basically the cecal tonsils. So the cecum again I'm kata kare areas, so it can be kind of hemorrhagic, or we call them blood spot, blood spot. hemohages කියලා අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට කියන්නේ. hemo ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ term එක අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට use කරන්නේ ඒකයි නිකන් hemohagic or hemohages කියලා ගොඩක් වෙලාවට use විස්තර කරනවා. ඇඟ ඇතුලේ සාමාන්‍ය blood ලේ සම්බන්ධ මොන හරි damage එකක් ඒ වගේ වෙලා තියෙනවා. leak එකක් හරි අපි කියන්නේ ආහාරයක් ආශ්‍රිතව හරි ඒ ආශ්‍රිත ගොඩක් leakage වගේ වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපි කතා කරනවා hemohages කියලා. So mainly diagnostic, what you can do is the postmortem analysis. So what you can do is you can just find, because if you see an animal like this, just like this, or maybe some characteristic like this, what you have to do is you can immediately do the postmortem analysis and see what are the basic characteristic, and then see and identify which disease these animals are suffering, and then do all the other treatments accordingly. What you can do is you can go for some preventive vaccinations. If you can remember, in the previous lectures I was talking about maybe during the first week, first 5 days, and maybe a little bit later. So what you can do is based on different strains, strains, you don't need to remember those kind of things, but just to give you some idea. So they have different strains. They can take a word. In මුලින් තිබ්බ කොවිඩ් එක නෙමෙයි අපිට පස්සේ හැදුනේ ඒ වගේ එක එක strains හැදෙනවා. So they can be kind of mutated and create new strains. So based on those strains you can provide a vaccine in order to prevent the disease. Prophylactic කියලා කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍ය preventive measures. මේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් use කරන term එකක් තමයි මේ animal science වල එහෙම නැත්නම් veterinary medicine වල prophylactic vaccination just to kind of prevent. අපි කියන්නේ අර prevention is better than cure term. So that's why we usually use that one. Also we use vaccination. So vaccination that use that's why we use vaccine even for humans. That is to prevent. vaccine So those are called prophylactic measurements or the prophylactic vaccinations for those birds or those diseases, right? So at the initial stage, you can use with water or maybe through the nose. Maybe at the later, what you have to do is you have to inject it to the intramuscular or the subcutaneous. Then the bird flu. I think you might have heard this one because it is very common disease in poultry birds. If you have kind of watched news, so one of the main barrier to import eggs to Sri Lanka because of these kind of bird flus. In India and Pakistan, they were talking about, I don't know whether there is an outbreak, but the Department of Animal Production and Health, they are suggesting that they are highly kind of having these kind of bird flu outbreak in different parts of India and even in Pakistan, I think. So therefore, they are not going to allow the importers to import eggs from India, Pakistan, and even in USA these days, you can see lots of avian influenza or bird flu incidents, right? So, because this can be spread to humans as well, right? There is kind of a chance it can be contaminated and get infected to human flu. Because they mutate වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Avians වල හැදෙන avian influenza එකක් විදිහට උන්ට ස්පෙસિෆික් විදිහට නමුත් contaminate වෙලා සමහරවිට අපිට දැන් ඔය COVID එකත් එහෙමනේ හැදුනා කියන්නේ වෙන සත්තුන්ගේ තිබිලා ඒ සත්තුන් හරහා අපිට ආවා වගේ අදහසක්. මේක ඊට පස්සේ human influenza එකකට ගන්නටලා worse වෙන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථාවක් තියෙනවා. Right? Therefore, this is also one of the main disease that we were talking about in terms of poultry management, and it appears time to time in the world, maybe different times, but at least once a year you will heard there is an outbreak for avian influenza. The main issue for the viruses is you don't have any kind of specific vaccine or whatever kind of you call medicine to cure that. Eka issue එක. ඒක හැදුනට පස්සේ virus වලට තියෙන ලොකු issue එකක් තමයි 100% මේක control කරගන්න අමාරුයි. So for a bacteria or maybe protozoa, maybe fungi, you have specific medicine or the medication. You can use, okay, for an example, for one disease, you can have amoxicillin. Okay, amoxicillin, bacteria issue එකක් ආවොත් එමට amoxicillin හරි මොනවා හරි ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඩොක්ටර්ස්ලා දීලා තියෙනවා. can make a target කරලා හදනවා මේ බැක්ටීරියා වලට තමයි මේක pneumonia හරි මොනවාරි බැක්ටීරියා. But when it comes to the viruses, you don't have specific vaccine or any other medication that you can cure it once you get it. COVID වලත් ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙනවා. COVID වලටත් අපි දෙන්නේ අර prophylactic vaccine just to prevent it or enhance the antibody inside your body. But you don't have any medication once you get it. ඕගොල්ලන් ඇගෙන් මෙයා හදාගෙන හොඳ කරගත්තොත් ඇරෙන්න වෙන කිසිම බෙහෙතක් දැන්ට වෛරස් වලට මේ ලෝකේ හොයාගෙන තියෙන ප්‍රමාණය 100ට ගොඩාක් අඩු. ගොඩාක් diseases වල. The AIDS වලටත් හොයාගන්න අමාරුයි because they can change very fast. Even for the COVID, they don't have any vaccine that will cure 100%. It's kind of a preventive measure or prophylactic measure just to support your immune system to fight against that virus, to enhance the antibody concentrations that will help you to enhance the immunity, not to kind of stop the disease. Ek disease එක 100% යකට දාලා. අද හැදුනොත් මේ avian influenza හරි covid හරි ඕකට දෙන vaccine එක ගාව කියලා අපිට හොඳ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද ඒ හැදුනට පස්සේ virus එකට බෙහෙතක් නැති නිසා, right? So that's the case with viruses. So that's why we have to more cautious about the viral diseases compared to all the other diseases. So once you get it, you don't have any control. You have to have previous or preventive measurements in order to control viral diseases, right? So basically these kind of viruses, they are mainly spread through the migratory birds, right? So the migratory birds, like for an example, when the European or the American countries or the America, Canada, maybe Europeans and the Russia, so those countries, so these are the winter season for those areas or those countries or those continents, right? A continent or the winter season. So birds, what they do is they just migrate to the other places, basically to the South Asians or the South American regions, right? The weather is very good for them. So it is kind of the tropical climate here. So they migrate into these areas. So with those birds, we get the disease. So that's how we get the disease. That's how we hear these kind of diseases is specifically from November, December, January, February, and March of the year. ඒ කාලේ තමයි අපි ගොඩාක් වෙලාට මේ disease එක ගැන අහන්නේ. මොකද ඒ season එක තමයි අර European region එකට එහෙම නැත්නම් North American region එකට winter season එක වෙන්නේ. So they bring the disease to our countries, right? Then what happens is it is spread among the birds, and it is very kind of highly contagious. Contagious කියලා කියන්නේ ඒක ගෑවුනත් ඇති වගේ අදහස්. Contagious. මේ ගෑවුනත් අග්ගාල spread, right? So it can affect the other poultry species, but highly susceptible ones are the chicken or layers and broilers, right? So what happens is suddenly they are dying. So there are no any clinical signs, so they just die within few days or few hours sometimes, right? So therefore you have to observe those animals and you have to kind of be cautious. So that's why we kind of because contagious can issue එක තියෙන ඉතින් අපි දැන් farm එකේ නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. But if you kind of go outside, if you kind of contacted with any kind of those kind of bird who are having these kind of symptoms, and then when you directly go into the farm and then start treating or kind of touching the animals, and then the disease is spreading. So that's why you have to have very good biosecurity system, specifically in those kind of poultry farms. Even that's why we are asked to kind of have a good space in between the kind of farm buildings, because if one building get infected, very easily it can be spread to the other building. අර ඒක ගොඩක් කරලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලත් ඇති සමහරට ඔය poultry farms වල ලොකු management level එකේ හිටන්න පොඩි සත්තු ඉන්නවා. ඊට පස්සේ පොඩි කියන අපි කියන්නේ starter animals and the growing animals and the layer animals. So they have dedicated areas for those buildings and dedicated staff. The dedicated I mean dedicated කියලා කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ විතරමයි. දැන් growers වලට කන්න දෙන්නේ ඒ කට්ටිය විතරයි. ඒගොල්ලන්ට they are prohibited, they are restricted to go other areas or the laying pens or the chick areas or the hatcheries. So they are only for that area. So they are kind of constructing those buildings just with sufficient space. This is just to kind of avoid any contacting with other animals or the humans, right? So that's why it is very important kind of constructing or designing houses, even addressing these kind of things. සමහරලාට ජීවිතේට මේ ෆාම් එකට හැදෙන්න නැති වෙන කොන වේදක්. නමුත් අර වගේ precautions එහෙම නැත්නම් preventive measures අපිට අරගෙන ඉන්න වෙනවා, right? But in addition, you can see some difficulties in breathing or the respiration. The mortality rate is really high. Sometimes it is 100%, and some disorders with like the nervous systems, and they cannot walk. They are just lying down, and their feathers are kind of infected, and you can see some hemorrhages. Hemorrhages means blood spot in the areas where you cannot see any feathers. In feathers, the area also blood spot. So then you have to be cautious and take necessary action to control the spreading of the disease, right? So you can see. So if you see this kind of edema කියන්නේ ඉදිමිලා තියෙනවා නිකන් face එක නිකන් අපිට ඉදිමිලා නිකන් තදිස්සි වෙලා වගේ කියලා කියන්නේ. So something like that. So it is kind of a characteristic of this disease, right? So when it comes to the broilers, one of the main thing is they have kind of lack of appetite, and mortality rate is higher, and also there is some depression-like characteristic of those animals, right? And also we can see the same factors like layers, like edema. Edema means it's like a big face and neck. Some issues with the neural systems. What you can see is they can walk properly. Their head is upside down sometimes. So you can observe those kind of things, right? So you can do the post-mortem analysis. So you can observe taking kind of a characteristic, some hemorrhagic kind of lesions, and the lesions or the post-mortem characteristic can be differed based on the severity of the infection. And it's ප්‍රශ්න pneumonia තියෙනවා මේ හැමදේම එකනේ characters තියෙන්න පුළුවන්, but intensity can be varied based on the severity of the disease, right? So you can see that clearly if you go for a post-mortem inspection. So most of the time, if they suspect something wrong with the birds, what they usually do is the farm management, they take birds to the veterinarian and they do the post-mortem analysis, and then based on the characteristic they observe, they declare what's going on with these birds. Right? The farm management has the responsibility to observe those animals and get most suitable precautions or the preventive measures to stop spreading those kind of diseases. So as I mentioned, this was kind of a disease that can be infected to humans as well. So I have given you some kind of human avian influenza issues. They are basically all over the world, specifically Asia, Africa, and Europe areas. You can see this kind of H5N1. I do ගොඩාක් කාලෙක news කියද්දී H5N1 කියන issue එක තමයි ගොඩක් වෙලාට ඔය අපි කියන්නේ human influenza A කියන එක තමයි A strain එක තමයි අපි හඳුන්වන්නේ. So who are the ones kind of high risk for getting or susceptible for these kind of bird flu issues? Basically, who are the workers or the farmers and other laborers who work in a poultry farm. Susceptible way, right? In addition, people who are traveling from those countries. So that's the other thing. So we actually, I don't know whether you are aware or not, other countries, specifically Australia and New Zealand, those kind of countries, they have strict regulations in immigration kind of processes. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා තියෙනවා නම් මේ වගේ දේවල් ඒ රටවල් වල ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැන් කොවිඩ් කාලෙත් හොඳට අහන්න ඇති. ගොඩාක් වෙලාට ඒගොල්ලෝ බයෝ සිකියුරිටි එක පැත්තෙන් ගොඩාක් වෙලාට කන්ට්‍රෝල් කරනවා. අඩුම ගානේ වැලි ඇටයක්වත් ගෙනියන්න දෙන්නේ නැති තත්ත්වයකට ඒගොල්ලෝ කන්ට්‍රෝල් කරනවා ඒ රටවල. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒ තරම් බයෝ සිකියුරිටි එක ගැන හිතනවා. That is because if somebody is coming from a country where you can observe higher risk of these kind of diseases, for an example, avian influenza, what happens is he or she can bring that disease to the country. So therefore, you have to have strict regulations in order to control coming of people from, or even some people bring animals or animal products from those countries. සමහර මිනිස්සු ගේනවා. දැන් අපි උනත් රටේ ගිහලා කොහේ ගිහලා මොන හරි අපි අරන් එනවා. අරන් එනකොට සමහරට කෑම වර්ගයක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ සත්තුන්ගෙන් හදපු ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. But the virus may be still there, right? So therefore you have to have very strict regulations for the traveling or the visitors from other countries who are highly affected with these kind of issues. So for example, bird flu. The animals who touch and infected birds, basically the laborers or whoever the farmers working with those animals, even veterinarians. So they are usually coming to farm and they check the animals. Sometimes if one farm get infected, when he visits the other farm, he can take the disease with him and spread in other farms, right? In addition, there are people who eat raw or undercooked poultry meat, eggs, blood from infected birds. කියන්නේ සමහර මිනිස්සු ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලා තියෙනවා අපි උනත් සමහර මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා එග් එකක් කඩලා එග් එක බොනවා නිකන් right fresh egg එක උදේට එකක් බොනවා සමහර රැට එකක් බොනවා එහෙමයි ඉන්නවා සමහරට ඒක හිතන්නේ infected bird කෙනකින් ආපු එග් එකක් නම් අනිවාර්යයෙන් යාට ඒක infect වෙන්න පුළුවන් right. So we have to kind of take care of controlling these issues in order to kind of prevent the spreading of those diseases among birds and among the people. මොකද ඊට පස්සේ වෙන ඔබ සොසයිටි එකේ මේ මනුස්සය ඔතන ෆාම් එක ඇතුළේ ඉන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ මාසේ වැඩි ඉවර කළා ගෙදර යනවා ඊට පස්සේ ගෙදර මිනිස්සුන්ට එළිදේ බෝල්. ඔහොම තමයි ඔය ගොඩාක් viral diseases infect වෙන්නේ එකිනෙකා අරගෙන. Right? Because they use public transportation most of the time. So the people who are traveling with him get infected because it can be spread simply by touching the contaminated surface. Right? So that's the issue. So the main symptoms, coughing, diarrhea, so issues with the breathing, the fever, the headache, sore throat. So most of the characteristics, even COVID, you can see the same characteristic, right? And ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට viral infection එකක් ආවම ඔය වගේ issues තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ගොඩාක් වෙලාවට දැන් අපි දකින සාමාන්‍ය viral infection එක තියෙන ඒවා තමයි තියෙන්නේ. But the severity of the damage can be observed just getting some postmortem characteristics and observe the symptoms, different symptoms of the severity right? So the next one is the bronchitis. Bronchitis infectious bronchitis. This is also kind of highly infectious viral disease, right? It can affect any age. Onama sapegiya onama breed එකකට affect වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ disease එක. Infectious bronchitis කියලා yeah, right? So basically the bronchitis again is the respiratory issues mainly basically we can observe some respiratory issues, signs like the coughing, sneezing, right? There may be some discharges to eyes or the nostrils, right? So if it is a layer, the dropping, the production will be dropped maybe at least by 60 to 90%. And the hatchability කියන්නේ ඉතින් අපි විතරවට පස්සේ ඒක පැටව වෙන ප්‍රමාණය. So the percentage of hatchability also will go down, right? So what happens is the egg, maybe their shell is very thin and the quality, the internal quality may be low and maybe the production is deformed. කියන්නේ අපි සාමාන්‍ය egg එකක් ගැන මම කිව්වා a round shape, right? Ovoid shape, right? So it's normal egg shape. What is the normal shape of an egg? Right? So, but once they kind of infected with this kind of disease, like IB, infectious bronchitis, so eggs, the outer appearance may be like this, the thin shell egg. So if you observe some thin shell eggs, maybe deformed eggs, different kind of shapes, deform, ovoid, oval, round shape deviate. There is an issue with these animals, maybe because of infectious bronchitis disease, right? So you can observe some postmortem lesions, and what you can do is as a preventive or the prophylactic measure, what you can do is you have to have vaccines. So what they usually do is inactivated live vaccines can be administered for those animals in order to prevent these kind of diseases, right? Then the Gamboro, I think the previous table I showed you also had this kind of the vaccination program. It's called the Gamboro disease, or we call them IBD in short form, the infectious bursal disease. It's kind of a highly contagious disease in young chicken. That's why we usually start at very early age. What happens is it will adversely affect on farm production or the economy of the farm if they get infected with this disease, right? So what happens is once they get with this disease, so infected with disease, it is kind of enhancing the susceptibility of this bird for other infections, because it will definitely kind of affect the bursa, which is really part of the immune system. Right? You can immune system attack attack immune system weak susceptible other infections. Worst worse 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 immune system ලෙඩ වලටත් එක්ස්පෝස් වෙන එක තමයි වෙන්නේ. මොකද අපි දැන් සාමාන්‍ය ඉමුන් සිස්ටම් එක කන්ට්‍රෝල් කරනවා සමහර ඩිසීස් ස්ප්‍රෙඩ් වෙන එක. ඒවා සාමාන්‍ය බොඩි කන්ට්‍රෝල් වෙච්ච ඩිසීස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ ඩිසීස් වලට ඇෆෙක්ට් වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ ඩිසීස් එක ආවට පස්සේ. right? So there are different signs. The animals are very lazy or dull, and they are depressed, or maybe some deaths time to time, and diarrhea is maybe in white in color. And what happens is the mortality rate is really high, right? So you can observe the post-mortem analysis and also see what are the places you can observe hemorrhages. So basically you can see the thigh area, the thigh muscles. So you can observe the higher percentage of lesions, and vaccines for the prevention process. That's why I mentioned you have to have this vaccine, I think 2 or 3 occasions during their lifetime in order to control these diseases. This is just to kind of prevent. So you can see these kind of muscle hemorrhages can be observed when they are exposed to this IBD disease or the Gamboro disease. Maybe hemorrhages, the bursal area can be observed. Then the other disease, even this one also mentioned in that table, that Marek's disease. This is kind of also a viral disease, right? But the thing is, I think you have heard about the herpes virus. So it is basically caused by herpes virus. Right? Basically, if you can remember, so we usually give the vaccine like at a very young age, because it's basically affects young chicken, and they are kind of about 3 to 4 months of age, so they are very susceptible. So therefore, in order to kind of build up the antibodies, so we have to give the vaccine at very early age of their life. The same symptoms like IBD disease, you can observe the dull appearance, the depression, the sudden death, and sometimes in coordination, what happens is they are kind of, once it kind of affect the neurons, can coordinate involuntarily. So what happens is they cannot coordinate their body, and when you observe the kind of post-mortem, so you can observe different kind of tumors in different places, specifically the visceral organs and tissues, the ovaries, the liver, the spleen. So you can observe those kind of tumors. Right? Something like this. You can observe this white color kind of tumors like thing because they are kind of susceptible to those kind of diseases, so infected with this disease. Viral නිසා මේ වයින් ඊට පස්සේ සතාගේ ඇඟින් හොද වෙනවා කියලා බලන් ඉඳලා කාලයක් නෑ සමහරලාට කෙලින්ම එක්ක මේ සතු මරලා දාලා මරනවා කියන කල් කරනවා නැත්නම් ටොක් එක පිටින්ම අයින් කරන එක තමයි කරන්නේ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලා සමහර බර්ඩ්ස්ලා ලක්ෂ ගණන් සමහර රටවල එකපාර මරලා අයින් කරලා දානවා මේ වගේ ඩිසීස් එකක් ආවම. මොකද අපිට වාගන්න බෑ මොන සතාට හැදුනේ මොකද හැදුන්නේ නැත්තේ ඒ ඉන්න කේජ් එකේ හරි පෙන් එකේ හරි හවුස් එකේ හරි දෙන්නේ හම්බෙලා දවස් දෙක තුනක් යනකොට ඒක ස්ප්‍රෙඩ් වෙනවා කියලා තේරෙනවා සත්තු මැරලා වැටෙනවා නම් මෙන්න මේ කැරක්ටරිස්ටික් තියෙනවා නම් ආයි බල ඉන්නේ ඔක්කොම ටික එකපාර ලයින් කරලා දානවා. අර ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලාදී ලොකු වලවල් හරලා dose or fitting දානවා. So that's why we are doing those kind of things to control the spreading of this disease that is profitable. Just kind of waiting and see whether they are getting cured or not. Again, අපි බලන් ඉඳලා මේ හොඳ වෙනවද නැද්ද කියලා බලනකොට එකපාර මාර ලයින් කරන එක ලාභයි economically farm එකේ management level එක ගන්න. So as I mentioned, we have the vaccine, the preventive vaccine. So it's a live attenuated vaccine. Again, අපි කියන්නේ අර ඇත්ත vaccine එකම ලෙඩේම ඒගොල්ලන්ට infect කරනවා නමුත් අඩු okay, කියන්නේ අඩු virulent එකකින් අපි ඒ සතාට ඒ vaccine එක දෙනවා. ඒ live vaccine එකක්. දැන් අපි අර COVID වලට සමහර කතා වුණා මේක මේ චයිනා වලින් එන එක ඇත්ත vaccine එක ඇත්ත එකම තමයි අපි infect කරන්නේ. ওই කතාව කොහොමද මතකද ඊළඟට කතා වුණා. සමහර අය කියනවා නෑ this is an RNA vaccine, this is a DNA vaccine, this is live attenuated vaccine. එක live but ඒගොල්ලෝ virulence එක අඩු කරලා ඒතර antibody මන්ට හැදෙන්න ගන්න. ඒ නිසා චූටි කාලෙම වුණාම මේ සතාගේ ඒ susceptible age එක වෙනකොට ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඕන කරන immunity එක develop වෙලා ඉවරයි. Right? Otherwise there is no any effective or very kind of efficient treatment once they infected with this disease. This is එක හැදුනාට පස්සේ එහෙම නැත්නම් වෙන කිසිම effective vaccine එකක් නෑ. මේ සත්ත්වෙන්ට මේක control කරන්න. Right? The only option the farmers have is just to kind of cull all the animals. If ඒකේ susceptible කරපු ඔක්කොම ටික එකපාර අයින් කරලා දාන්න තමයි කරන්න තියෙන එකම option. Then they have to disinfect all the house. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඊට පස්සේ කරන්නේ සම්පූර්ණ house එකම disinfect කරලා දානවා. ඒකෙන් පස්සේ. Then the fowl fox, like to kind of chicken fox to our chicken fox killer level. So they have kind of the lesions, skin lesions on the featherless parts of the body. And feather එක නැති area වල ගොඩක් වෙලාට ඔයගොල්ලන් දකින්න පුළුවන්. නිකන් අපිට අර කපල හැදෙනවා වගේ තමයි chicken fox වගේ. Right? So that's called basically the fowl fox, right? So you can see some nodules, the lesions surrounding the unfeathered area, specifically the comb, wattles, the eyelid දෙක අර අපි කියන්නේ ඒ හරිය ඒ වගේ ඕන unfeathers area you can observe those kind of lesions. Okay? One of the main preventive measure is the vaccination. You have to provide the vaccination in order to control those kind of diseases, basically the viral diseases. So the next one is the IBH. So basically it is common in the broilers at very early stage. So you can observe certain mortality conditions, depressions, anemia, hepatitis conditions, right? So you can observe, if you observe the muscles, as you do the post-mortem analysis, the muscle color is very pale yellow. A pale color එකක් කියන්නේ නිකන් අර brown නිකන් light brown නිකන් pale එකක්. අපිට හොඳට තේරෙනවා ඒක මේ මොකක් හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා කියලා ඒවත් එක්ක. And there are some hemorrhages. Internal bleeding වගේ අපි කියන්නේ internal bleeding කියලා කියන්නේ hemorrhages වගේ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So that is one of the characteristic of these. The other thing is, please remember, there are some diseases, they have common symptoms, right? So you have to have better, just looking at outside, you cannot say, okay, this is Newcastle disease. No. You have to do the post-mortem analysis. Sometimes you have to go for culturing. Culturing කියලා කියන්නේ මේගොල්ලෝ මේ tissue samples අරගෙන culture කරලා බලන්න. Whether this is a bacteria or this is a bacteria viral or maybe some other issues. Otherwise they can just go and observe all the genetic materials and see and study what is the structure, how they are kind of multiplication, how they are growing, what is the main route of infection. Samahara diseases touch 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 ඒක මේ නහය nasal නැත්නම් respiratory issue එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. The bronchitis වගේ එකක් හැදෙනකොට ඒක මේ කටින් ගියා කියලා හැදෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකට බඩට ගියා කියලා digestive tract එකෙන් ගියා කියලා හැදෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක නහය හරහා. ඒ කියන්නේ බොහොම මේ nasal එක හරහා යන්න ඕනේ නැත්නම් respiratory system එක හරහා ගිහලා තමයි ඒක effect වෙනවා. So you cannot say this is kind of this disease just observing only one character. You have to observe several characters and even go for a postmortem or even further, maybe genetic material analysis in some cases to identify and confirm the disease, right? So there are some other syndromes called egg drop syndrome. So what happens is there are some diseases or the syndromes just drop the egg production in laying eggs. එක පාට හොඳට eggs දෙනවා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් our target is to kind of have at least 300 eggs per year from one layer hen. What happens is sometimes the egg production will drop, maybe even for 30 to 40% egg production. So, and then what happens, you can observe some cracked or shell-less eggs. අර මම කිව්වනේ දා ස්මත් එක තියෙනවා මැග්නම් එක තියෙනවා ඊට පස්සේ ඔන්න යුටරස් එකට එනවා යුටරස් එකේ තමයි ෂෙල් එක සික්‍රීට් වෙන්නේ කියලා. Sometimes you can observe everything without the shell, right? So it may be because of this egg drop syndrome, right? So you can observe. So that's why there are several diseases. So you have to kind of clearly understand, study to get the main root cause of that disease, right? So in order to control those viral diseases, as I mentioned earlier, so there are different type of vaccines. So live vaccines, or killed or inactivated vaccines, right? So what happens is when it's come to, as I explained earlier, so live or the activated, so they contain live ones, right? Which ones happen is like we control the pathogenicity. Yani yagen lede හැදෙන්න පුළුවන් එහෙම නැත්නම් disease එක හැදෙන එක අඩු කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒකෙන් අපිට يعني ඒකෙන් අපි කියන්නේ significant effect එකක් වෙන්නේ. Right? So that's why we call them live, but they are activated, but the disease virulence or the pathogenicity is controlled. Right? It is definitely went down or goes down because of this kind of activated vaccines, but still they are live. ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ඇත්තම පැතජන් ඉන්නවා. නැත්නම් ඇත්තම ඒජන්ට් ඉන්නවා. නමුත් එයාගේ full capacity එක අපි control කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒක දැන් ලෙඩක් හැදෙන්න the disease එකක් අපි agent ලා කියන්නේ. For an example, if you want to get the disease and show some symptoms of that disease, one kind of agent or maybe two, maybe three, or maybe even five may not be enough. Maybe you may need 100 or maybe 50. Can අපි ගමු ලෙඩක් හැදෙන්න ඕන හිතන්න මොකක් හරි ඕන අපිට ලෙඩක් හැදෙන්න. කොවිඩ් කියලා හිතන්න. කොවිඩ් එක හැදෙන්න එක පාට වුණ වෛරස් එකකින් එක්කෙනෙක් ඇතුළට ආවා කියලා හැදෙන්නේ නැහැ. එයාගේ එක ලෙවල් එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි අර LD value කියලා කියනවා. එහෙනම් cut off value එකක්. ඒ cut off value එකට ඇවිල්ලා ඒ value එකට වඩා වැඩිපුර ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒ මේ this is මේ يعني create කරන agents ලා release වෙනකොට තමයි ඒ disease එක අපිට හැදෙන්නේ. Right? So likewise, so you can have live agents inside your body as long as they are not virulent. They are virulent or the pathogenic enough to create the actual symptoms. මේකදී අපි කරන්නේ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ අර antibody හදන එක enhance කරන්න live කට්ටිය එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ activity එක අඩු කරලා inject කරලා තියෙනවා ඒ සතා. So what happens is the body identifies, okay, something wrong with my body. There are some unwanted organisms inside my body. So then the body starts creating antibody. So then once they infected with real virus or the whatever the real organisms with the real pathogenicity, so they already have the vaccine or the antibody. So they will control the spreading of the disease, right? The other one is the killed or inactivated vaccine, right? What happens is they have kind of the agents, whatever the viruses or the bacteria, but they have chemically inactivated, right? ඒගොල්ලන්ව already inactivate කරලා තියෙනවා, right? So then you kind of they are not able to transmit the disease at all. ඒක බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. ඒ වගේ vaccine එකක් කියන්නට ගත්තා කියලා, right? So there are several like vaccines available for the viruses, for the bacteria, for the parasites, right? So there are different methods of administration of those, what do you call, the vaccines, right? You can use water, you can use the, what you call, the nasal or the nose, right? Or you can go through the eye. ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ ඇහැට ඩ්‍රොප් එකක් දාන්න. අපි දැස් වලට අපි සමහර ලේදවලට අපි ඩ්‍රොප් එකක් දාන්නේ. ඒ වගේ. එතකොට එක එක routes නැත්නම් routes අපිට use කරන්න පුළුවන්, right? The drinking water, that is the most popular way, because anyway birds are drinking water. So when you, as you can remember in the previous lecture I showed you, so we can put water into the automated drinking water systems, and then when birds are drinking water, they will get the medicine at the same time, right? In addition, there are some medications you have to have through their nose or nostrils or the mouth or through the eye, right? So in that case, you have to use individual or the manual administration method. එක සතා තනි අතින් අල්ලල්ල තාලා මොකද ඕගොල්ලෝ දැකලා සමහරවිට හදිස්සියට එක පාට වගේ ලෙඩක් ආවම සත්තු මේ ඉන්න ෆ්ලොක් එකකට ගිහිල්ලා ලෙඩක් හැදෙන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා සැකයක් තියෙනවා නම් වෙන ෆාම් එකක ඕන ලෙඩේ එනවා නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාට ලේබර්ස්ලා 10ක් 15ක් එකතු වෙලා එක සතා අල්ලලා ටක් ගාලා ඇඩ්මිනිස්ට්‍රේෂන් එක කරලා ඒ සතාව මාරු කරනවා අනිත් දෙන්නේ. නැත්නම් වෙන ස්පේස් එකකට ඒගොල්ලෝ දානවා. Right? So the subcutaneous, intramuscular, right? The vent area. So ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ අර back side එකේ cloaca එක මම අර කිව්වේ එකකින් ඉන්නේ මෙතන cloaca එකකින් කියලා. rectum එක වගේ ඒගොල්ලන් කියන කොටස, right? or the wing එකට මේ මේන විදිහට අපිට ඒ අදාළ routes එක අනුව අපි ඒ අදාළ disease එක අනුව we have to select the best route based on the disease condition and the recommendations given by the authorities for the given vaccine, right? Right? So as I mentioned, so when you have a large number of birds, what you can do is you can use an automated drinking water system in order to vaccinate process. And there are some vaccines aerosol. කියන්නේ AI එකට කියලා මම හිතන්නේ මෙතන තියෙනවා. Okay. Aerosol route. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් අපිට විතර large number එකක් ඉන්නවා සතා ගන්න මේවා කරන්න බෑ. අපිට පුළුවන් vaccine එකක් do. We can develop a vaccine when we can spray to the air, just microclimatic environment, the birds when they breathe, so whatever the vaccine automatically enter through the respiratory rate, right? So that's what happens for these kind of vaccines. So when it comes to the drinking water method, so what happens is we mix smaller volume of the vaccine, right, with the drinking water. We can add into the water troughs. Water troughs කියලා මම කියන්නේ අර නිකන් අර පොඩි බංක් වගේ හදලා දිනවා පොඩි කොටු වගේ හදලා දිනවා ඒකනේ බේසන් වගේ නේද කොන්ක්‍රීට් වලින් වල හදපු troughs තියෙනවා එහෙම නැත්නම් manually remove කරන්න පුළුවන් troughs තියෙනවා ඒකට අපිට මික්ස් කරලා තියන්න පුළුවන්. So what you can do is you can put them into the automated water system. But one of the things that you have to remember is, because if you want to kind of enhance the drinking of these medicine or these animals, you have to kind of restrict to access to water at least for several hours, maybe 1-2 hours minimum. You have to restrict water access for these birds, right? You know, සත්තුන්ට වතුර access වෙන එක අඩුම ගානේ පැය දෙකක් අඩු කරලා තියන්න ඕනේ. මොකද මේ සත්තු දැන් එතකොට ඉවහා තියෙනකොට ඒ සත්තු ටක් ගාලා බොන්න පටන් ගන්න නිසා, right? So it is so if you want to start the vaccination process maybe 10 a.m. in the morning, so you have to stop giving water maybe around 7-8 a.m. in the morning. So you have at least 1-2 hours. So then the birds are very thirsty. What you have to do is you just mix whatever the vaccine with water and then allow them to drink. Right? So then since they are thirsty, they just start drinking and they get the water as well as the vaccine, right? Or the medicine. What you can do is you can have a program, right? So as I mentioned you in the previous table, so you can have a program for kind of a poultry farm and for the layers and for the broilers. අපිට පුළුවන් ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ age එක අනුව මේ කාලට මේ vaccine එක දෙනවා කියලා decide කරනවා. So we can decide the age based on the recommendations given by the vaccine manufacturer. So you can decide, okay, 0 day or the day they were born, or maybe after 7 days, or maybe day 14, or maybe day 28. So based on that, you can decide which vaccine is given to which animal types, right? So it's kind of the program system. So this kind of a similar table for different diseases, right? So what is the vaccine? What is the disease? What is the age that we can administer, right? So IM is the intramuscular, is seen in the subcutaneous, something like that. So I mentioned you, there are different routes for these animals to give that particular vaccine. So you can use those kind of programs for all your farm throughout the year to vaccine these animals, right? So the other thing is, before going for a vaccination program, or vaccination, not a program, even for single vaccination program. So what you have to do is you have to vaccinate healthy birds. Even if you can remember very recently for your COVID vaccines, so they are asking you whether you have some symptoms. Do you have headache? Do you have fever? Do you have coughing? Or any other symptoms, similar symptoms? So if you say, okay, I have headache, or I have fever, or I have a runny nose for several days, they will not administer the vaccine to you because your immune system is already activated by then because of some issues with your health, right? You can vaccination like vaccine the birds observe. So are there any issues with the birds? Are they showing some symptoms, right? So you have to vaccine very healthy birds, very healthy active birds who are not showing any symptoms, right? And you have to handle the birds very gently, right? You cannot kind of create a mess around the pen or the cage and running here and there and creating some noises and hitting the birds and the animals. No, you have to handle the birds very gently, very silent way, and then vaccine them. Select the best day, time, right? For an example, if you can remember when we were talking about the broiler processing, so we selected the best time as the morning or evening hours for the transportation for slaughtering process. Similar to here, it's better to select the cool hours of the day, or maybe early morning, or maybe late evening, right? To kind of vaccinate these animals, because at that time the birds are very calm, they are very relaxing, so it's better to vaccine during that time period. You have to avoid any overcrowding. You can go dark, and also we have to kind of maintain the vaccine under refrigerated conditions, sometimes in the freezing conditions, right? And you have to keep records of all the vaccination programs, right? You have to kind of write it down, which animals, because in these cases, you cannot have kind of individual records, right? For an example, when you have 1,000 birds, you cannot have a dedicated number for each and every animal, right? Broilers are layers number 1, number 2, number 3. But for the large animals, like for dairy cattle or beef cattle, they have a separate number, a dedicated number, right? So, but for these animals, you cannot have kind of a dedicated number. For that, you can have a kind of a one number for a whole batch. You select a one pen or one house. Okay, this is pen number 1 or house number 1. Okay, the A number again, we gave this vaccination on this day, this amount. So you have to have all the records and what is the vaccine, who is the manufacturer, the day of administration, the volume that you administered, everything should be written down, right? And you have to kind of follow all the guidelines given by the manufacturer. You have to kind of dilute the volume. For an example, for the COVID vaccines, for the kids, they get a very lesser volume compared to the adult, right? After that, kids like have අපිට දුන්න වොලියුම් එක මයික්‍රෝලීටර් 20 නම් ඒගොල්ලන්ට මයික්‍රෝලීටර් 5ක් නැත්නම් 10ක් තමයි එකපාර දුන්නේ. That's how. So you have to follow the guidelines. You have to kind of see the instructors given by the manufacturer and follow all the guidelines, right? You have to use all the sterile, whatever the equipments that you use, specifically the needles and the syringe or the vaccine guns, they should be sterilized, right? You have to sterilize time to time you change and you cannot have two vaccines on the same day, or maybe or very kind of lesser interval times, right? There are some vaccines and there are some human vaccines. They mix it and give it together, but there are some vaccines you cannot give both vaccines at the same time. So it will create some issues inside the body, some drawback in the immune system. Therefore, you have to have at least 1 week interval in between those vaccination programs, right? So likewise, you have to kind of see what are the basic preventive or the pre-vaccination care for those birds before administering any vaccination, right? So the more information available here, so you can just read through those kind of things and see whether you understand everything. And I think these are pretty kind of simple things. You can just read it and then get some understanding what are the main pre-vaccination care steps that you should take before starting the vaccination process. So what are the post-vaccination? Yeah, post means once you are done with the vaccination, what are the things you should do, right? So what happens is, right, you have to give water all the time. You have to give the access to water all the time. So they need to drink more water, right? Then you can use some anti-stress medications such as vitamins A and E, some antibodies, some probiotics, right? Some sugar like glucose or maybe some tonics. Again, අපි දවස් අතුන් අපි vaccine එක ගැහුවට පස්සේ සමහරවිට හොඳට කන්න කියනවා, හොඳට වතුර බොන්න කියනවා. ඒ මොකද මේ අර අපි තියෙන ඇඟේ stress එකක්. මොකද once immune system is activated, it's very stressful for the body. You have to provide more energy. දැන් අපි හිතන්න අපි ලෙඩක් හැදිලා අපේ immune system එක activate කරනවා. අපි COVID හැදුණා කියලා හිතන්නකෝ. ඒ COVID හැදුණාට පස්සේ අපි හොඳට කන්න බොන්න ඕනේ. මොකද කන්න බොන්න අමාරුයි එකෙන්. නමුත් අපි පුළුවන් තරම් කෑබි නැත්නම් ඒ immune system එක activate වුණාම අනිත් ඔක්කොම activities වල efficiency එක අඩු වෙනවා. අවතිනවා කියන එක නෙමෙයි. For an example, digestibility. එහෙම නැත්නම් nutrient utilization and heart rate sometimes respiratory rate. They are all going down, right? Because the immune system is activated, most of the energy is diverted to the immune system. You know, ගොඩාක් energy divert කරනවා immune system එකට. මොකද යා ඉස්සෙල්ලා බලන්නේ මේ immune system එක කරන්නේ සතාව survive කරගන්න. මොකද අර මොනවා කරත් කෑවත් වැඩක් නැහැ immune system එකෙන් අපිට ඇඟේ ලෙඩේ හොඳ කරගන්න බැහැ, right? So therefore you have to use some anti-stress medicine, right? Not kind of even though I mentioned medicine, it is just vitamins or some probiotics, right? Some sugar like glucose, right? So we have to kind of use some anti-stress or medicines maybe for a couple of days just to kind of comfort those animals, because during the first few days their immune system is fully activated. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැකලා ඔයගොල්ලන්ට feel වෙනවද? ඔයගොල්ලෝ COVID vaccine ගත්තා නම් පළවෙනි vaccine තුනම අරගෙන තියෙනවා නම් සමහර අය පළවෙනි එක දෙවෙනි එක ගැව්වම සමහර අයට හරි අමාරුයි. ඒ මොකද immune system එක already activate වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ දවස් ටිකට පුළුවන් තරම් stress එක අඩු කරගෙන පුළුවන් තරම් relax එකේ ඉන්න කියලා කියන්නේ ඒකයි. මොකද එතකොට පුළුවන් තරම් ඇඟ adjust වෙලා ඇඟ පුළුවන් තරම් comfort වෙනවා ඒ ඇඟ ඇතුළේ වෙන immune system activation එකට, right? So when you come to the kind of controlling, managing the vaccination schedule or the program, so please check the expiry date. Never use expired vaccines, right? Then use proper storage and transportation, right? So basically they are stored under refrigerated conditions, most of the animal vaccines, but never store them above 8 Celsius degrees. Because there are some vaccines, if you store above or below the recommended range, they will start deteriorating or destroying, right? You cannot kind of open them or kind of store them under direct sunlight, right? So you cannot mix 2-3 vaccines together, right? As I mentioned, never use kind of high temperature days for the vaccination programs, right? And no vaccination for the sick birds, right? So we have to take care of those factors when you kind of plan your vaccination schedules, right? And you have to provide the proper nutrition. You have to reduce the stress of those animals. So please kind of go through those factors when you study for the examination, right? So next I will be talking about a few diseases under other categories, right? The aspergillosis is kind of fungi. So we can see it mainly affects the lungs of those animals, right? So basically it's occur in the brooding stage. Brooding basically brooding stage. So during that period, the birds are highly susceptible, right? So they are basically transmitted to the litter or the contaminated litter. So if you see the deep litter system and if the litter is containing higher amount of moisture and very high RH inside the the housing system, what happens is it will enhance the spreading of these fungi diseases, right? So you can see some issues with the lungs, right? Because it's mainly having the lungs of the animals, right? You can see some nodes, the white color nodes in the lungs, right? In the cocci, in short form we call cocci or coccidiosis, right? So what happens is it's basically showing some bloody droppings, blood drops like in the pulva. Or you can see some diarrhea with some small blood particles, like blood spots, diarrhea. And you can see, also observe their feed intake will go down. What happens is this is basically spread through the litter. Litter again, bedding material. So when we use that wire mesh or the slatted fork, so you can minimize spreading of these kind of diseases. So that's why I told you previously, we have to have a very good litter system if you are going to maintain a deep litter system for broilers or the layers. Otherwise, it is the main source for spreading some diseases like fungal diseases and coccidiosis, right? So when it comes to some bacterial diseases, so I have mentioned several diseases similar to the viral and the fungal diseases. One is the fowl coryza, right? So this is also kind of a contagious disease and basically affecting the upper respiratory tract, right? And also what happens is it has a chronic form. Acute and chronic form kila කොටස් දෙකක් දෙනවා. acute කියන්නේ නිකන් කෙටි කාල සීමාවක්. දවසක් දෙකක් සාමාන්‍ය පැය 28ක් වගේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඇතුළත එනවා නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඒක acute විදිහට අපි ගන්නවා. chronic කියන්නේ longer term. So it's kind of lasting for longer term, and if you see the symptoms for longer term, that is called kind of a chronic issue, right? අර ඔයගොල්ලෝ අහලා chronic kidney disease කියලා CDC කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒකයි අර chronic කියන්නේ longer term. පොඩි කාලයක විතරක් නෙමෙයි. ඒක චූටි කාලෙක සති දවසකින් දෙකකින් හැදිලා ආයෙ ඊළඟ දවසේ වෙද්දී අඩු වෙලා යනවා නම් ගැටලුවක් නැහැ. but ඒක longer time තියෙනවා නම් අපි කියනවා chronic disease එකක්, right? So what happens is the facial edema කියන්නේ අර ඉදිමිලා තියෙන එක, right? So what happens and also the birds will show some nasal discharge with the foul smelling. Foul කියන්නේ අපි කියන්නේ නිකන් අර සරව ගඳක් වගේ නිකන් යම්තු නිකන් අර මොකද බැක්ටීරියා disease වල ගොඩක් සෙම එනවා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ සෙම ගතියක් අරවමත් ඉතින් ඒ වගේ සෙම ගඳක් වගේ ටිකක් එනවා foul එකක්, right? So the wattles, they are swollen, or the edema, you can see the diarrhea. One of the main characteristics that you can observe in any of the diseases is kind of reducing feed and water intake. Right? So that is one of the most simple observations that you can see in these kind of birds. Their water intake and feed intake will go down first, and right after you can observe different other symptoms like diarrhea, the bottles are swollen, the facial edema, and mucus discharge to the nose, right? So you can give some kind of medicine for the control the antibiotics. So the penicillin, streptomycin, right? You can deliver them through feed or drinking water, and you have to kind of follow proper disinfection process. So once we are done with, if we can remember the all-in, all-out system, right? What system a system in the birds before introducing those birds, new birds into the pen or house, you have to disinfect whole house. You have to take out all the litter. You have to clean whole house, right? Then you have to apply some paint, right? And then put new litter, brand new litter, and introduce bird into that house. Again, අපි දැන් හිතන්න දැක broilers කට්ටිය. ඒගොල්ලෝ අපි ඉඳලා දවස් 45ක් කියමු 45න් අයින් කරාට පස්සේ ඒ සත්තුන්ට කිසිම ලෙඩක් හැදුන්නේ නැහැ එච්චර දවස් කියලා අර තිබ්බ ඩීප් ලිටර් එකම කම්මැලි කමට පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ. What we have to do is we have to take all the litter out. We have to do the disinfection properly and introduce new litter and then new birds. අපි සතියක් දෙකක් වගේ තියලා තමයි අලුතෙන් ආයෙ දාන්නේ birds. හොඳ? ඒ සත්තුන්ට හැදුන්නේ නැතුවට ඒ සත්තුන්ගේ තියෙන විසදී මොකද ඒ සත්තුන්ගේ immunity එකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන් ඒ disease එක හැදෙන්නේ නැති වෙයි. right? ඒක නිසා අපි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට කරන්නේ මේ සත්තුන් අයින් කරලා සතියක් විතර තියලා හොඳට හුණු ගාලා පේන් කරලා disinfect කරලා අලුතෙන් ලිට එකක් දාලා අලුතෙන් අපි යනවා. ඒක තමයි one of the best ways or simple method to control most of the diseases, right? If you see these kind of what we call diarrhea, the white color diarrhea, it's maybe issues of some what we call the salmonella issues, right? So you can see the weakness of the bird, the loss of appetite, as I mentioned earlier, right? So you can see some greenish brown color patches or the skin around the vent area. සතාගේ අර back එක side එකේ දකින්න පුළුවන් නිකන් green color වගේ චූටි skin color එක වෙනස් වීම, right? So the same thing you can have different the bacterial or antibiotics for these birds in order to control or to support immunity development or the enhancement. මේ bacterial disease නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපිට පුළුවන් මේ හැදුනට පස්සේ උනත් බෙහෙතක් දීලා control කරගන්න. That's one of the main advantages of these kind of bacterial diseases. But better to prevent, but even if they get infected, we can still control, right? So the other thing is these kind of bumble foot and observing these animals, right? That is also kind of a bacterial infection, staphylococcus, right? So you can see some injuries to the lower part of their foot, right? So what happens is, so when you keep them on wire mesh or threaded foam, right? So they have some injuries, this kind of, then what happens is the bacteria will enter, then cause the disease, right? And they have a disadvantage with thin, right? What happens is the swelling of the foot, and there are some pus kind of cerebrospinal abscesses. So there are some wounds or some edema, small tumors-like thing filled with pus. Cerebrospinal thallium සහිත වගේ කොටස් තියෙන පොළ, right? So what you can do is you have to individually take the animals and you can disinfect with some alcohol. You can open the skin and take the pus out or drain the pus out, right? So then you can cover with any antibiotic ointment, and you have to kind of do it repeatedly until the food get healed, right? You can
Is that a deficiency of vitamin B?
But yeah, there are some issues with vitamins and those kind of things, but mainly, so if you rear these animals on kind of hard floors, you can again rock surface වල කරද්දී ඒගොල්ලන්ට damages වෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? ඒකේ නිසා ඊට පස්සේ bacteria ගේ infect වෙලා main causes are like this. Right? Yeah. So you can provide better housing conditions, bedding clean and drying and everything. So most of the kind of preventive and control measures for the bacteria, so they are kind of pretty similar, right? Somebody asks, let's see how slides that I. So I am almost done actually. I have very few slides to complete, like maybe 5-6 slides. So shall I continue and finish within 5-10 minutes?
Okay.
Thank you. So then we are done. Okay, so the one of the main thing is to kind of provide better housing. Housing means better bedding conditions and better environment in order to control even bacteria, virus, or whatever the other diseases. But for the bacteria, one of the best things to control is just to provide better housing conditions, just to kind of be good litter, bedding, and we have to keep them clean, dry and deep. That's why we usually ask them to have a deep litter system for the layers, because they are staying for a longer time, right? And you have to take out whatever the potential sources that may cause injuries to the birds, sharp objects and surfaces, that is to control these kind of issues, right? Those are some positive agents for the disease. You don't need to remember those names, right? But I have mentioned what are the main, positive agents and what are the main symptoms. If you summarize each and every disease or the main diseases that the animals can face, right? This is just to show you some images of different diseases. So the deficiency, so what would happen if the diet, the nutritional deficiencies, for an example, vitamins and maybe the minerals. So I have summarized the main deficiencies of and main characteristic of each vitamins and minerals, right? You don't need to remember everything, but just try to kind of understand. Diseases can be caused not only because of those agents like bacteria, viruses, fungi, or protozoa, but also different nutritional deficiencies can cause different diseases, right? And the mineral deficiencies. So if you can remember clearly, so the calcium deficiency may cause thin shell or shell-like growths, right? So the expression will go down, the hatchability and the growth will be go down, right? Even the phosphorus, it is really important. It may cause some soft bonds, affect the decreased egg production, right? So likewise, so I have mentioned different minerals and vitamins that may kind of cause some diseases in addition to the diseases caused by agents. කියන්නේ අපි කියන ඔය සත්තු කියලා අපි හිතන අදහස් කරේ මම කියන්නේ virus bacteria ඒ වගේ අය අමතරව diseases cause කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ වගේ ඒ viruses. For an example, they can have this kind of issue if they have deficiency of vitamins, right? Poor growth, curl toe paralysis කියන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ සත්තුට ඇවිද ගන්න බෑ. ඔය එක නැමිලා නිකන් අර අමු කියන්නේ බැලුවම අපි දන හිස වගේ හරියට තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ ඊට පස්සේ මේ ඇවිදින්න try කරන්නේ. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට කෙලින් කරගෙන ඇවිද ගන්න බෑ. So they have very poor growth because of they cannot walk properly and they cannot walk to the feeders and then eat well, right? So their growth kind of poor growth, and then they have some issues with the wings because the wing growth will be kind of less. They are droopy. Droopy කියලා කියන්නේ නිකන් අර එල්ලා වෙටන පොඩි ගතියක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. No in kind of healthy appearance of those birds, right? So in order to prevent those things, you can provide the vitamins, right? So with that, I can finish. So what I can do is this one, if you feel like you have more kind of information, so I will summarize this one too, and even I can upload the same thing, the original one, and I will kind of summarize and upload into the system. You can go through it, and whoever the kind of the group, I think the Saturday group will have the examination, I think within 2 weeks, right? So I will let you know with the Dr. Shashi, and I will ask her how to kind of conduct the examination, and I will let you know. And I will upload them maybe within 1 or 2 days. You can, I can upload the original one maybe tonight, but the thing is to upload the kind of summarized one, I may need 1 or 2 days, and then I summarize it and then go through those things for the examination purposes. And if you have any questions, so you can just, I think through the, what you call LMS, right? So you can text me or message me. So if you have any questions, so I can answer. If you have any kind of things that you cannot understand, I think I will get a notification or get an email if you kind of ask any questions through the LMS. And I will put some practice questions as well. Maybe 10 kind of practice questions from all the sections, just to give you some hint or heads up how the exam would be. And then you can kind of practice. Maybe within 1 week time, I will, maybe by next Sunday or Saturday, I will upload all the kind of practice questions. Since they are MCQ types, so it will be easy for you because you will have all the answers, but you have to select the best answer, right? So if you have any question, please ask me. And otherwise, yes, you can leave the lecture. So even if you don't have any kind of idea what happens last week, so please just give me some, what do you call, some, you can ask any questions or any kind of difficult things to kind of clarify. I will be here tomorrow too, so you can access tomorrow too. Even after the lecture, you can come and maybe around this time, you can ask any questions if you have. මොකද ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න. මම lectures මේ ඔරිජිනල් එක අප්ලෝඩ් කරන්න. රෙකෝඩින් එකක් මම අප්ලෝඩ් කරන්න. ඒක මම පොඩ්ඩක් අහලා බලලා කරන්න. මට ඒක තේරෙන්නේ නැති නිසා මෙච්චර ලොකු මේ
Recording stopped.
but lecture notes ටික දාන්නම්. නමුත් අර සමරයිස් කරපු ටික අනිවාර්යෙන් බලන්න. ඒක බැලුවේ නැත්නම් ටිකක් exam එක අමාරු වෙයි. right? අද කට්ටියට කියන්නේ ඊට කට්ටියට මම ටික තමයි ගොඩක් වෙලාට කියන්නේ. මොකද ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් කියන්න. ලාස්ට් වීක් එකේ මම අප්ලෝඩ් කරලා තියෙන ඕගොල්ලන්ට බලන්න බැරිද LMS එකේ? මම හිතන්නේ මම අප්ලෝඩ් කරා ඔක්කොම ටික. ඔයාලා access නැද්ද lecture notes? මේ LMS එකේ තියෙනවා. මේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ බැලුවද LMS එක නේ? මොකද එක්කෙනෙක් දාලා තියෙනවා last week summary notes not received sir. මම ඒක අප්ලෝඩ් කරා ගිය සතියේ මැත්තට. ගිය සතියේ සවුන්ඩ් අහුවා ගාවද මම අප්ලෝඩ් කරා සමරයිස් කරපුවා. මේ මේක බලන්න LMS එකේම නැත්නම් මට කියන්න මම ඒක මේ මොකද මම හිතුවේ ඔක්කොම අප්ලෝඩ් වෙනවා කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ මට පේන ඔක්කොම අප්ලෝඩ් වුණා හැමදේම කියලා මට ස්ටුඩන්ට් view එකෙන් බලන්න බෑ. ස්ටුඩන්ට්ස්ලා බලලා පොඩ්ඩක් මට ඔයගොල්ලෝ කියන්න ඔයගොල්ලන්ට බලන්න හරි ඩවුන්ලෝඩ් කරගන්න හරි බැරි නම් මම ඒක මොකක් හරි කරන්නම් මේ ආයි ඇඩ්මිනිස්ට්‍රේෂන් ගන්න. මට එතනින් එහාට කරන්න තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ මේ සිස්ටම් එක මේ මට ඇක්සස් තියෙන්නේ අප්ලෝඩ් කරන එක විතරයි. පේනවද නැද්ද කියන එක මම හරියටම දන්නේ නැහැ ඕගොල්ලන්ට. මට පේනවා මම අප්ලෝඩ් කරා ඔක්කොම කරන්නේ. මොනවාරි ගැටලු තියෙනවා නම් අහන්න නැත්නම් එක්සෑම් එකට good luck අද group එකට මම එහෙම බයින්න එපා එහෙම මේ අමාරු ප්‍රශ්න මොකක්වත් අහන්නේ but try to kind of focus on what I have given you mainly. And there will be for an example. Our architect question key active by the Shashi mistake MCQ. How are you correct?
40
sir.
Yeah,
40 sir.
40. 40.
1 hour.
1 hour for 40 questions, right? ඒතර ඒකේ answer එක තියෙනවා ඒකම MCQs තිබ්බත්. ඒ කියන්නේ sorry මේ answers තිබ්බත් question එකේ answer.
Also question and 4 answers.
4 answers, right? So what I do is the same thing. But the thing is for an example, if it is 40 questions, there will be 30 questions you can directly find the answer, right? But there will be about 10 questions you have to think and find the best answer. Maybe sometimes you might see, okay, this is the best answer, this is the answer, but that may not be the answer, right? So read the question carefully. So that's what I usually do for our undergraduate lamai, kind of undergraduate lamai gattama manga ekai samannya kiyanne for the undergraduate too. What I usually do is they have basically about 20 MCQs. So the first 15, they are very straightforward. If you have gone through all the materials, you can find the answer very easily. But for the last 5 questions for them, they have to think, right? There will be answers like seems pretty similar, right? But you may be confused in some cases. So that's why just read the answer and read the question and get the best answer for those questions. So if you have 40 questions, you have 30. Very easily you can find the answer. But for the last or the other remaining 10, what you have to do is you have to think and you have to read your kind of lecture notes prior to kind of getting the answer or the exact answer, right? ඒක නිසා පොඩ්ඩක් ඒ questions 10ක් විතර පොඩ්ඩක් හිතලා කරන්නයි. හිතලා කියන්නේ මම කියන්නේ ඒවා ගණන් හදන්න අරන් මොනවක් කරන්නේ නමුත් අර එකපාර straight forward answer එකක් නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? සමහරවිට ඔයගොල්ලෝ දකින answer එක නෙමෙයි හරි answer එක වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්, right? Therefore just think about it, but I don't make it very difficult for you. I just want to pass all of you guys. So just kind of try to study well. That's why I usually make summary notes as well. That's what I usually do for my other students in undergraduate. I usually create kind of a exam bank and then give them some practice questions. And then what they usually do is basically come to the examination as well. Right? ඒ වගේ ප්‍රැක්ටිස් ක්වෙස්චන් 10ක් පාලා දුන්නාම ඔය දෙන්න 10 15 හතරක් පහකට අනිවාර්ය එක්සෑම් එකට මම දානවා. ඒක ටිකක් අර ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කම්ෆර්ට් වෙන නිසා ඒක නිසා චුට්ටක් ඒත් ස්ටඩි කරන්න. But at least you may have 10 to 15 questions you need to think and kind of get the answer. But other 25, maybe 25 to 30, maybe pretty easy to get the answer. ඒත් මොකක් හරි ඉෂුව එකක් තියෙනවා නම් මම හිතන්නේ මැසේජ් කරන්න පුළුවන්. මම අහපු විදිහට ඒ මැසේජ් එකක් දාන්න මේ කොටස තේරෙන්නේ. මොකක් හරි කියලා මම අර පුළුවන් විදිහට ටයිප් කරලා එවන්නම් ආන්සර් එක. මේ okay, that's මට අද
I have a question, sir.
Yes.
Why do we not inject vaccines for infected chickens?
We can do the infected chicken means like this. For a virus, there is no point of giving an injection or any kind of vaccine once they get infected, because we cannot cure it. The best way we can do is we can prevent it, right? We can a vaccine. If you, for an example, just take one viral disease, right? So once the animals get that disease, you don't have any vaccine to cure it, like COVID. Once you get the COVID, you cannot give a vaccine and just cure it. No, you just kind of give the body to kind of cure it by itself, right? Similarly, for the bird, you can prevent it. So that's why we get the COVID vaccine to prevent future kind of infections, not the one that we already have, right? Again, the other COVID has not other vaccine එකක් ගහුවා කියලා අපිට COVID හොඳ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි දෙන vaccine එකේ effect එක තියෙන තව මාස 6කට පස්සේ වගේ. Same thing happens to the animals. For the viral infections, you have to prevent it. That's why preventive vaccines are given. They have never developed a vaccine that can give to birds once they infected with the virus. That's the issue.
That means there is no point of injecting.
No point of injecting kind of vaccine for a viral infection. Viral disease, no point of injection. No, nothing. Once you get it, no point of giving the vaccine, right?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, once you get it. But before getting the vaccine, you can inject it. But in animal welfare conditions, the main recommendation is minimum handling of animals. So that's why basically most of the poultry or broiler related kind of companies, they develop vaccines that they can so the kind of administered through water or kind of aerosol or maybe through feed. Again, අපි vaccine හදන්නේ ගොඩක් මොකද ඔය සත්තු අල්ලලා ආය අතරිනවා අල්ලලා අතරිනවා මිරි කරනවා ඒක කරද්දී සත්තුනේ ගොඩක් stress. So therefore what we want to do is we want to minimize the kind of handling of animals. That's why we administer that vaccine through water or through what you call feed. But if you want to vaccinate them, individually you have to take that animal and inject it. So just imagine if a broiler farm or a layer farm, in one house there are 10,000 birds. So just imagine how many number of laborers are needed, how many number of vaccines. You have to change the kind of needle from each and every animal, one by animal. Otherwise, it will spread another disease from one animal to another animal. So that's the main issue. So that's why basically we give them through water or feed or through the aerosol. So we don't have much contamination. We don't need to touch the animal. On the other hand, for the viral disease, it is just a prevention, not the cure. That's the key. So somebody asked me when you ask practice questions. So I will give you practice questions by next week, which means by next Saturday. No, yeah, by next Saturday morning, I will upload the practice questions. And which is pass mark. How many marks? I have no idea about that one. Somebody asked me about which mark is pass mark or how many marks we have to get a A pass or B pass. I am not sure about that one. I think, let's see about the course capsule. They have mentioned it. Yeah, our prospectus වගේ එක දාලා නැහැ. But in general, I think you have to have maybe, I'm not sure, maybe more than 50%. I will check it and let you know. ඒ කියන්නේ හිතන්න question 40ක් දුන්නාම ඉතින් අඩුම ගානේ question 25ක්වත් හරියන්න ඕනේ නැතිනේ. I am not sure. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට answer එකත් එක්ක උත්තර කීයක් හරි ගියාද කියලා ආවද ශෂින්ස්කි එකේ? ආවේ නැද්ද? ඔයගොල්ලෝ answer එක දුන්න උදාහරණ MCQ 40ක් දුන්නාම ඒ 40 ඔයගොල්ලෝ කීයක් හරි ගියාද කියලා answer එක ආවද නැහැ? කරපුවා එහෙම ආවද මොකක්ද?
ආවා sir.
Okay. So maybe I am not sure. I will talk to Shashi and let you know. But at least I think maybe you may have to take at least more than 40% or 50%. I am not sure. I am just kind of hypothesizing about that one. I'm going to check Shashi. මේක දාලා නැහැ මේ prospectus එකේ. නමුත් ඒකක් වීකක් ගන්නදී අඩුම ගානේ 40 35ක්වත් ගන්න ඕනේ නැති මං හිතන්නේ. සාමාන්‍ය අර ඔල් ලෙවල් වගේ සිස්ටම් එකේ කොහොම තමයි යන්නේ. මං හිතන්නේ මේකෙත් ඒ වගේ වෙන්නේ නැති. Right? Let's see. I will let you know. I will post an announcement about the grading system. I will talk to Shashi and let you know what is the grading system for these courses. But I am not sure about that. Sorry. Okay then. If you don't have any questions, good luck for the exam. I will upload all the full lecture notes and summary lecture notes and practice questions next Saturday. I will create maybe 10-15 practice questions and then upload it to the system. And you can go through and then see. If you find any questions, just shoot me a message and I will reply you as soon as I get a chance. Right? Okay, then see you and thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Somebody asking me when is the exam? I think 2 weeks time, right? ඒක නේද කිව්වේ අද ඉඳලා 2 weeks time වල නේද ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඊයේ exam එක තිබ්බා කිව්වේ අර group වලට නේ previous class වල එහෙම නේද කිව්වේ කවුරුහරි
Yes sir.
Okay, yeah, so 2 weeks time, so maybe today is 28th. I am not sure, but this is kind of tentative date. If it is 28 today, tomorrow is 29, so the next week Friday is 3rd, maybe 10th. ඔයගොල්ලන් Friday ද එතකොට තියෙන exam එක. එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැති නේ. දෙවෙනි සතියේ Friday වෙන්නේ නැති නේ. ඒක දවසයි නේද නේ? ඒ දවසේ කරන්න ඕනේ. Most probably maybe 10th February. I will check with Dr. Shashi about that and let you know. I will post an announcement. Yeah, most probably your examination will be on 10th February if I am correct. But I will let you know. I will confirm to you. Okay, see you then.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.